It is after 7 o'clock, so if people could take their seats, and we're going to get started real soon. Okay, we're going to call this meeting of the Hayward City Council to order. And I'll ask you to please rise and join Councilmember Wahab, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. Councilmember Cermeño. Councilmember Marquez. Present. Councilmember Mendel.
Here.
Councilmember Lamnin. Here. Councilmember Wahab. Here. Councilmember Salinas. Mayor Halliday.
Here.
Thank you.
I do want to announce before we go any further that we do have, again, our Spanish translation services available here. This lovely lady over to the side of the chamber. If you need assistance in that regard, please see her. And I'm going to ask our city clerk to make that announcement in Spanish.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Buenas noches. Las personas que necesitan la traducción al español pueden aproximarse a la persona que está aquí al frente con las mesas. Gracias.
Thank you. Now I'll ask our city attorney, Mr. Lawson, to make the closed session announcement.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Please refer to the closed session agenda, which was, the closed session was convened at 5:30. The council discussed litigation-related items. Number one involved 2 workers' compensation cases. The council took no reportable action, and then the council discussed and took no reportable action with pending litigation. The case title is on the closed session agenda. That completes the report.
Thank you. This brings us to our action items, our consent calendar. First, I do have requests to pull items number 2. Yeah, glossed right over that, didn't I? You're right. We're going to have public comment next. That's the order of our agenda. And actually, I do have a few cards on that. So if there's anyone else who hasn't filled a card out who would like to speak, please come forward. And the first speaker is Jim Drake.
Can you hear me? No, now you can. I've been here in Hayward since '63. Will your taxing fees, taxes, we got a utility tax, we got fees, we got bonds. Bonds is just another way of taxing people. You had one bond that was supposed to be a sunset bond. It was for about 7, 8 years, 10. 3 years, 2 years before it was even finished, you came back and extended it another 20 years. And for the people that are watching this loop, you ain't going to be able to do nothing but maintain the road on Mission, Foothill, and everything for 15 years. You cannot change that loop, period. You're not telling the people that. You've got the consultants and everything are leading the people along like they're going to make the loop change and do it. But you can't do nothing for 15 years. Caltrans got that in. And it's going to cost millions to keep these roads without the potholes. Millions. 15 years on one layer of asphalt. Asphalt's good for about 7 years and it starts breaking up. I've laid it myself for many years. But anyways, on these conditions of approval, Fran drew these conditions up. She talked me into moving what I was building, a triplex, put the back of it facing the neighborhood and the good side towards the street. Well, I went along with it. Now you cut down the eucalyptus trees. But I want to start on that, but it's going to go through paper on paper because McAdoo, I'd give you $500 to debate these conditions in my favor, just like that. And you'd have a slam dunk with these conditions. Are you open to $500? And you can give it to the city. No. Don't look puzzled, Mendel. But anyways, the rents are going up because of all these fees and stuff, and you keep adding more fees. But as soon as the people take stupid off of their forehead and say no more, your city will be bankrupt just like that.
And with that, your time is up. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Our next speaker is Tim Romano Pugh.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Tim Romano Pugh. I work with the Eden Youth and Family Center in South Hayward, and I am the manager of the Hayward Coalition for Healthy Youth. So I'm here with my colleague as well as a youth. We actually had 2 youth that were going to come today, but one of them got delayed, so he won't be here, unfortunately. But we're going to talk about flavored tobacco. So just a little bit of background information. Flavored tobacco products, including cigars, cigarillos, smokeless tobacco, electronic smoking devices, and vape devices, are increasingly popular among youth. The sweet flavors, colorful packaging, and cheap prices of flavored tobacco products are highly appealing and directed at youth. There are over 15,000 flavors, such as fruit flavors, candy flavors, liquor flavors. And tobacco companies know that the earlier one starts using tobacco, the higher risk of addiction and the harder it becomes to quit. 81% of youth tobacco users age 12 to 17 started with a flavored tobacco product, and 80% used a flavored tobacco product in the past month. Many believe that flavored tobacco or e-cigarettes and vape products are safer than cigarettes, yet the FDA warns that all tobacco products pose serious health risks. In addition, e-cigarettes flavored tobacco users are 4 times more likely to begin smoking traditional cigarettes. Nationally, e-cigarettes use increased by 80% among high school age students in the year of 2017 alone. In HUSD, 32% of 11th graders reported using tobacco, also in 2017. This is indicating a rapidly growing trend. 63% of HUSD 11th graders believe that it is very or fairly easy to obtain e-cigarettes. 47% perceive little to no harm in using e-cigarettes compared to smoking regular cigarettes. In 2014, Hayward was ahead of the curve. We were the first in Alameda County to enact local policy to regulate the sale of flavored tobacco products. However, there are many limitations to the ordinance. Stores can be grandfathered in and continue to sell. The restrictions only apply to stores within 500 feet of schools, and it does not include menthol cigarettes. Our data shows that tobacco use in Hayward is still on the rise and on par with other cities that do not have any restrictions. Locally, we can follow in the footsteps of Alameda, Albany, Oakland, San Leandro, and San Francisco, which all passed local ordinance to further restrict or entirely ban flavored tobacco products despite industry resistance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jessica Fuentes. Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute. Councilmember Salinas, did you want to ask a question of him? Okay.
I wanted to ask, I don't know if the city manager or any staff knows an update on this, but the San Francisco Board of Supervisors were going to hear a ban on, or they were going to vote to ban e-cigarettes citywide. Do you know if that would pass? It did pass. Okay.
Livermore is also in the process, actually, this week of a total flavor ban as well as electronic devices ban, which is a first.
All right, thank you. Jessica Fuentes?
My name is Jessica Fuentes. I'm here from the Youth Advisory Council. So I'm going to be talking about flavored tobacco. In Mount Eden High School, there are restrooms for females and males that have handicap restrooms that are really big, and many teens go and ask to go to the restroom. And when they go to the restroom, they all get in the bigger restroom of the handicap lift, and they vape. And you can smell the odor of the vape. And sometimes security walks around, but they don't ever really pay attention. And they stay in there and they just do, e-cigarettes. Also, it's very well known that on Instagram and Snapchat, many teens are posting, oh, we're selling flavored tobacco, $5 for 8 a pack or something like that, and it's really easy for people to see and get because it's, the internet. And then my little brother, he's in 5th grade in Palmacia. Because of YouTube and Instagram, he's able to see vape tricks and how cool they are, and he's like, oh, maybe I want to do that one day, and his friends talk about it, and that's that they're 5th graders. So it means that this is a big impact for them too, because they're kids and they're going to go through it. It's so easy for one peer to just tell them, hey, you should vape because it's cool. It's that easy for teens to just get involved into these things. So, I hope you guys are able to make a change, and it would mean a lot to me. Thank you for your time and listening for the youth voice.
Thank you. Next, Carter Woods.
Carter's the individual that wasn't able to make it.
Okay.
He did send me a statement. I don't know.
Well, I think, we'll just move on to Rosara Mendoza.
Hi folks, hopefully you're doing really well. So my name is Rosaura Figueroa Mendoza. I have been working with the Youth Advisory Council since September at the Eden Youth and Family Center, and so I have some statements from youth that I want to read off. And so Jacob Karen Dang, he's from Mount Eden High School, and he lives in Hayward. So many Hayward residents have been diagnosed with asthma, including myself. While waiting for a gas station for my ride home, I sometimes see classmates of mine consuming tobacco products. While smoking at a gas station is terrifying in enough, it also affects my ability to breathe well, since the smoke affects my lungs a lot. Secondhand smoking is a big problem, as so many people who have decided not to consume tobacco products are still negatively affected by them. And so that was Jacob. Fatima Velasquez is also from Mount Eden High School. Just a month ago, my classmate from second period, who I mentor and see as a friend, was hiding a pen, an e-cigarette, in her backpack and was smoking during class. She offered it to me and I refused, but it still hurt me to know that that's what she resorted to instead of paying attention in class. So my cousin himself started smoking tobacco products when he was young, and now he steals money from his own family in order to buy them since he's become ever so dependent on the tobacco products. And so this has affected not only her peer group during class and her education, but also her cousins and her own future family relations. And so continuing with her statements, yes, it may be the parents' responsibility to keep their children in line, but it's ultimately the shop's fault and really policies that are enacted by City Council and the people that work at City Hall. And of course, the push from the community to be able to have policies that protect youth, right? To be able to, and then also the shops who allow these purchases to be made, especially to minors, right? And so Malia Holgate, she's from Hayward High School. As a kid growing up in Hayward, I was exposed to a lot of tobacco and flavored tobacco products. I can remember in just 7th grade, some of my peers smoking flavored tobacco. It's very harmful to your body and way too easy to get. We need more rules and regulations to reduce the use of flavored tobacco. And so in the work that we've been doing, Tim and I, with the Youth Advisory Council, we've given at least 2 trainings, and people have come from Alameda County Office of Education, or just Alameda County, right, to be able to give talks. And so one of the biggest takeaways has been, the fact that tobacco companies very much prey on low-income students of color, youth of color, right, to be able to then have ongoing customers for life, right? So that's probably the creepiest part of it. And so we tied it to how the same thing happens with fast food. Fast food is super cheap and easy to obtain, and so the same thing can happen with tobacco products, where they're super cheap, easy to attain, and you get lifelong customers when you get them early on. And so thank you for your time, and I hope that you can listen to these policies and listen to the youth voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Rosalind Moya. And I was going to say about the statement that you have, if you want to give it to our city clerk, she'll distribute it to all of us if you have it in writing.
Hi, my name is Rosalind Moya. I'm the co-chair for the Alameda County Tobacco Control Coalition. I am also, I work for a not-for-profit where we work with students at Chabot College on working to get that campus 100% smoke-free. And I have a little bit of a show and tell for you today, but also I wanted to kind of mention, as they're talking about flavored tobacco and where are the youth getting these things. So what we have found from the kids survey is that let me just read it to you, about 74% of youth report purchasing their jewels at a local store, at a local physical retail store. In a nationwide survey of youth that was aged 12 to 17 years old. And that's why it's so important to really look at the retailers and how they're affecting our community and our youth. So I have a little bit of things to show you because sometimes I think visuals are one of the best ways. So this is my favorite candy as a child. It's Sour Patch Kids. It's like sweet and sour. It's colorful. And this is an E-juice. If you look at the font, and if you look at the coloring, even if you look at the name, Candy Batch Kids, it just looks like candy. Who are these targeting, right? And when I asked what does a flavor, smell or taste like, and it's similar to this. It's a little sweet, it's a little sour. I know a middle school that told me how her friends would vape and they would blow out the smoke, and she would jump and try to smell it. She doesn't vape herself, but it's very interesting to her. It's very intriguing to her to smell it. It's just it smells good. I have a couple more things to show you. These are 2 things that I purchased here in Hayward. I was volunteering with the Department of Public Health, and what I noticed was, it was great that Hayward has a minimum packaging, but the fact that it doesn't have minimum price has really affected that, because I noticed Hayward has one of the cheapest tobacco products, priced tobacco products that I've seen, which this is one, 5 for $1. It's a peach mango cigarillos. And over here, usually a pack of cigarettes ranges in price between $5 and $9. But when it's a little cigarillo, when it's wrapped in tobacco, it's different. It's cigarillo, and this is $2.50 for a pack. And I want to show you another thing. Something that Asians love to drink. I don't know if you've seen these. These are the pearl drinks, boba drinks, sago for Filipinos. And here's another e-juice. It's called Not Tea. And I got it on sale for about $7.99 for this juice.
So yes, thank you for the demonstration. Your time is up, but thank you for educating us here.
If you have any questions about the Livermore stuff, I was there last night.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Nayeli Marquez.
Good afternoon. Dear Mayor and Council members, I am writing this letter on behalf of my family-owned restaurant in downtown Hayward. The restaurant is called Aqua Farina. I'm pretty sure all of you have knowledge of that restaurant. It's an Italian restaurant that has been there for almost 5 years in October. I want to address several issues that has been occurring ever since the city decided to take off the cameras. The surveillance cameras that was placed in front of the bank, right in front of it. Ever since they removed, we have been having quite a lot of incidents of vandalism, including broken windows, broken windshields. Several workers have been having their cars scratched and sharp knives. Customers have also gotten their cars vandalized, as well as many more other incidents. All of these incidents were reported to the police in Hayward, but we frequently get told that there's nothing much that we could do, so we have to pay the cost, basically. My question is to all of you, if these are constant issues that are occurring at this particular restaurant and close family-owned businesses and stuff, why aren't we talking about this issue, or why aren't we taking action? I would like to propose a city council meeting that involves city members, of course the mayor, and family-owned businesses, and also the police of Hayward. I would like to set up a date and time in order to inform my uncles, the workers, and also customers who have experienced this several times. It is saddening to know that working or even eating at the restaurant puts everyone at risk, because I physically was there when some of these issues occurred. Puts everyone at risk of coming to their cars and seeing the broken windows. And I asked you all to have a meeting, public, so I could let know my family. And in order to speak in regards to this constant vandalism issue that has been affecting hardworking workers, but most importantly, the safety of the Hayward community itself. So yeah.
All right, thank you. I think that we might look at perhaps having a neighborhood meeting in the downtown here to address, to see if we can discuss some of these issues that are happening. So we'll look to try to do that sometime in the future.
Do you know approximately when we could?
Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that. And I mean, we certainly can call the restaurant, and you didn't leave a phone number with us, but if you would like to leave a phone number too with the city clerk, we'll call and maybe have a meeting with with the folks at your restaurant. But we'll see about doing something wider in the downtown.
Yeah, because this is not just a one-time thing; it's several times. My dad has gotten his
right, and we have also a new organization that is looking at doing some additional security and cleanup measures in the downtown. It's under a new program we've established. So hopefully we can. I want to ask if the city manager has anything she wants to add here.
No, I'm happy. As long as you just leave your contact information, maybe we can make sure if we have a phone number and email, we can reach out and figure out what's going on with the camera situation, and then talk with you further about some other strategies.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Our next speaker is Charlie Peters.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. My name is Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals, a coalition of motorists who's interested in issues affecting people who drive cars. Since last year, I've had some interesting information come my way. I went to the bank, and they're in the process of doing significant modifications to the parking lot. And I said, there's no sign there indicating what it's about, but what they tell me is that the largest bank in the country is putting in electric charging stations that are no charge to anybody that's a customer of the bank. And that the price of charging your car is free. Well, that's really unusual for banks to do something for free. I think there may be some additional information there somewhere that may be worth looking at. I went down to this place that sells a lot of product here in town and talked to a couple of people there and gave them a little information about fuel and so on. Next thing I know, there's a cop there asking me if I was handing stuff out, and I said, oh, no. And so one of the managers tells me to go down and look at the end of the parking lot, and there's 17 brand new charging stations for one of the Bay Area businesses, exclusive only to them on a major national business. And they're probably going to be delivering product and probably even putting food in your refrigerator in your house with your permission, with you not there. Also, I found out that the largest retailer in the country is brick and mortar, which is putting in charging stations for Volkswagen throughout the country. So we have foreign companies primarily that are being paid for I'm sure out of tax dollars to play very interesting games when we could in fact make the use of ethanol voluntary in our gasoline, drop the price of gasoline from $4 to $2, create credits to fix our roads for free, and maybe we won't need to sell out to BYD and Volkswagen and foreign corporations and Shell Oil to give our business away. And in fact, we'd have money to run the state, run the city, fix our roads, and put money spending money in the people of California, of Hayward's pocketbook for spending. I'd like that a lot better, and I'd certainly like your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gleno Silva. Who does not appear to... Gleno Silva? No. Okay, and that was the last card I had requesting to speak under public comments. If there's anyone else who would like to speak, please come forward. If not, we will move on to our action items, starting with our consent calendar. And as I said, I had requests to pull items 2 and 3, so I would entertain a motion on items 1, 4, and 5. Moved by Councilmember Lamnon, seconded by Councilmember Marquez. Is there anyone who objects to passing those items? Seeing no one, those items are unanimously approved. Item number 2, who requested that be pulled? Oh, we have a couple of speaker cards on it. Okay. And the first is from Alicia Lawrence.
Good evening. Alicia Lawrence, I'm a member of the Hayward Collective. I live in the Burbank neighborhood. I just wanted to encourage you all to pass the ordinance as initially approved last week. And part of the conversation last week was if there were any considerations or things that you wanted to potentially review, that those be diverted to the Homelessness and Housing Task Force. And I think that that is a fair way to go about any changes that anybody, including ourselves, would like to see in this ordinance. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Matthew Hurst.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for listening to me and considering what I have to say about adopting the new rent control regulation ordinance. I'm a property manager, and our company works almost exclusively with small owners, like 4 or less units. In the past 12 months, we've had several take their rentals off the market to sell, and lots of others asking about what's going on in Hayward with the legal processes, and also considering selling their units, very unhappy about what's happening. I think we all agree that we're in a housing crisis, absolutely, and I appreciate your heart in wanting to help people in this process, but I think we're going in the wrong direction with these changes. We're just going to make more people sell, and there's going to be less rentals on the market, and things are only going to get worse. I do appreciate what you're trying to do. But it's a supply and demand issue, and we're not addressing the supply issue. So we're moving in the opposite direction, and I just want you to consider not doing this. Also, I think you're asking the wrong people to shoulder the burden. We're in a crisis, but these are not the people that you want to be put the burden on. So that's all I have to say about that. Please reconsider. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, I have no other speakers. Okay, moved by Councilmember Marquez, seconded by Councilmember Cermeño. On the motion? And the motion passes with 7 aye votes. Item number 3, Councilmember Mendel.
There are
parts, okay, sorry. About item number 3? Okay, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, of course you do.
I just wanted to disclose to the public that I will be recusing myself from this item. My family owns property in close proximity to the specific parcels, so I will leave the council chambers and come back when this item's done. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll call up the first speaker. The first card I have is from Alfred Antonini. All right. How about Gina? Does she want to go? Gina Antonini?
We want to thank you for pulling this off the consent calendar. My family owns the building at 1004 B Street, which is the building that Hayward Station was approved to use when you guys approved them as a dispensary. And we're really excited to have them in our building. They plan on revitalizing the inside, also keeping the historical part open so people can see. This building is old, it brings a lot of history, and we're excited about that part of them revitalizing and maintaining the historical part of the building. We're excited also because Hayward Station will bring a lot to the downtown area. It'll be a high-end dispensary, so that we bring higher-end people to the area, not... I know when people think of dispensary, they think of low lives and all that type of stuff. This is really meant to bring in higher clientele, which of course will bring them to higher possibility of using the restaurants, getting drinks, getting food, buying things in the stores in our city, as well as enjoying the movie theater. So we're excited about that as well. But one of the biggest things is going to bring security. They have lights. They're going to be lit up all the time. They're going to have someone there physically 24/7, 365 days a year. What more can we ask to have someone sitting around? It's going to be less graffiti, less vandalism, and that's what we really need in the downtown areas, to be safe and feel safe. So we're excited about that, and I thank you for your time, and we hope you vote for them.
All right, thank you. Pat Doherty. Certainly. But if they speak, they need to introduce themselves then, okay? I know we should know them. We saw you last week, but.
First of all, thank you very much for seeing us and allowing us. Before I start, I'd like to address Council Member Salinas. At the last meeting last month, you called me on the carpet. I was the one that met you at Snappy's, and I'm the one that wrote the report. I'm the one that did the transcribing and including it in our CUP application. I was shocked when you said I misrepresented you, but the next day when I looked at it later that night, I realized you were absolutely right. So I wanted to apologize to you in public. I did not intend, that was not the intent at all. It was inadvertent, it was meant for me alone, and it got rolled up, and I apologize. To the City Council, all of you, another apology is needed. We did a poor job on the 28th. After that, we were all stunned as it slowly devolved. We had not got up here as we should have and filled out the speaker cards and presented our picture of what we want to do with this bank. I've lived here for 45 years, not 45, 42 or 43 years. I've raised 3 kids. My wife's lived here 60 years almost. We love this place. It's been our home, and we love the downtown. I love this bank, and I'm very excited about opening a business. And when I found out we could do this and do that sort of thing, and hopefully help revitalize the downtown area, I'm ecstatic. This is a dream come true. And I promise you I'm going to work my best to do that. I mean, I've got nothing else to do. These people all have other businesses. I've been retired for 15 years. I'm getting back into the work business, and I look forward to this with all my heart. I just can't wait. That area now, I know there's a lot of concern about children and safety. I looked on the map where all the schools were located, and I didn't see a particular path that's going to bring kids to our school kids tramping through every day. I've been there a lot. I don't see a whole lot of kids. I'm sure there's kids there. There's going to be a lot of kids in downtown. But that area right there is going to be about the safest area in the whole downtown. We're going to have layers of security. We're going to have guards, 2 guards when we're open. We're going to have 24/7 cameras. Those cameras are monitored when we're not there. They're going to have a loudspeaker ability to get on the loudspeaker and tell whoever's doing whatever. The police are being notified. Stop doing what you're doing. We're on their way. They'll hear that through a loudspeaker when we need to do it. The tapes will be available for the police anytime. My partners that have the dispensary in Hayward in San Francisco have never had a problem in 15 years needing the police to come to their place, but the police have come in order to use their tapes to help with crimes and stuff that's going on outside the dispensary with nothing to do with them. We're going to have guards, we're going to have cameras, we're going to have lights. The very fact that building is alive and there's action there will be another safety layer. Our customers, they're going to be the people you see in your everyday life, the people you see in the grocery store, the people that are in the bank next to you, the people that we live next to, our neighbors. And I wouldn't sit there and watch a child be in jeopardy, or an old person, or a handicapped person. I would help, and I think most of my neighbors would, and I'm convinced of that. I sure hope so. I know my kids would, I know I would, and I'm sure my partners would too. Another thing I wanted to touch on, and I could go on a lot longer, and I'd be happy to expand on any of this if you'd like, is the community benefits. And we included in our application quite a good list of what they have done in San Francisco. The United Play is keeping kids off the streets, getting they donate to Laguna Honda Hospital monthly for the cancer and hospice patients. They do a gun buyback in partnership with the police. They donate to the Yerba Buena Center for Arts. They're very active, and we tried to tell you and get you to understand that's what we want to do here. I didn't want to just pick random charities out of the blue to tell you we're going to do that after calling them, so I'm sure they would all be happy to take our money. We want to work with you. We're happy to do the 1% is going to be a minimum for us, as far as we're concerned. That's not an issue whatsoever. I wanted to use that personally to expand our reach in the community, to write checks for the various communities, charities, and non-profits that we can help. And if we don't know them, we'll be coming to the Hayward Foundation to find out. But regardless, we have no problem. Now, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we're very excited about being a part of the town. Okay.
Okay, and could you just, did the rest of you want to speak, or are you just up here to answer questions?
We're here whenever you want.
And did you submit cards as well? Yeah, so I know some of your, okay, so there's at least one. Councilmember Wahab?
Thank you. I have a couple questions for you guys. Your lowest paid employee, how much do they receive hourly?
$20 an hour.
Okay. And are you in operation anywhere else?
Yeah, they have a dispensary. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Hayward Station as a whole are only in Hayward, but 4 of the 6 of us have other dispensary in San Francisco.
Now, when somebody enters your building, are they supposed to identify their license ahead of time before even entering the building?
Yes, it's state law required that they have to show their ID to a security guard before entering the facility to verify that they're 21 and over or that they're a medical patient, and then they are further verified again on entry by the receptionist.
Okay, and your clientele is mostly made up of what type of people?
Honestly, a wide variety. We have senior citizens, we have young people, we have middle-aged people like ourselves. It's really a very large variety of clientele that we have.
And how many security guards do you guys have at any given time?
2.
Thank you.
And also 24-hour oversight of the cameras as well in addition to that.
Okay. Councilmember Mendel.
Do you know, it was probably in the report last week, but 2 weeks ago, but I've forgotten. What is the dollar amount that you're planning to invest in the building? Do you know? For the renovations and upgrades and whatnot?
Minimum is going to be about $500,000, and we're planning of spending up to $1 million on the renovation of the building.
Okay. How many total cameras in the end, inside and out?
It's going to probably be a minimum of about 32 cameras.
32?
Yes. Pretty much every inch of that building is going to be monitored inside, outside, and like we said before, even at night, we're going to have 24-hour surveillance, somebody watching the camera at every moment, and they'll have an intercom system. If anybody is trespassing or if a transient is by or someone's trying to use the bathroom on the building, they will be like notified that they're being watched at that moment. It's a really good deterrent for crime that's happening outside of our building.
And you mentioned the addition of lighting as well, I'm assuming on the inside and outside?
Yes, exterior as well, especially in the back parking lot. All brand new LED lighting will go in the front and the back on the side of the building. So anywhere that we can put it without it interfering with the structure and the historical aspect of the building.
Right, okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? I don't see any right now of you. You might hang around up front in case any more come up. And I assume that you're Ms. Darrow, we met the other day, Sid Ashar, Miguel Rodriguez, and Justin Jaron. Okay, so we'll put your cards aside. I have one from Kim Huggett. And just maybe hang out up in front here in case any other questions do come up.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Hadley, members of the council, I'm Kim Huggett. I'm president of the Hayward Chamber of Commerce. And a little embarrassed to admit that after attending about 250 city council meetings since 2010, I got a political science lesson the last time we discussed this issue, which is my principle had always been, don't make the meeting longer if you believe that the vote is going to go your way. I mean, and the vote kind of showed that that was a mistake. But it was based on a unanimous approval of this project by the Planning Commission, 5-1 vote by the council at the time in favor of the project, and the fact that it was the highest rated of the applicants. So I think maybe we got a little, or I got a little over-optimistic on the issue. And then plus, there were issues that came up during your discussion that would have been wonderful for us to address, or for me to address in particular, given that for almost the last 9 years, every day I drive to Main and B Street where my office is, virtually at the corner of B and Main Street. And I can attest, this is not an area for school children. I'm there day and night, too many nights, too many weekends, but that's the nature of my job. And I can attest that this is not an area where school children even traverse to go to school. It's not on the way to Burbank or Bret Harte or even Hayward High School. In fact, this council and past councils have taken that into account as they have put together a downtown that is generally aimed at an adult experience. Within one block of B and Main Street, there are 6 bars, soon to be 7 with 990 Lounge, soon to be 8 when we add a wine bar at the Structure Properties location at B and Main Street. Within 2 blocks of the center of the intersection at B and Main Street, there are 21 alcohol-related businesses. So this is clearly an area that has been created for adult entertainment. And we don't tell adults how they want to be entertained as long as they do so legally and under the conditions that we've set for our community. I was disappointed to hear about the restaurant with the lack of cameras on Main Street, because Structure Properties indeed does have cameras. In fact, there was a vandalism incident a while back, 2 weeks ago, on the B Street side of the Green Shutter Hotel that the cameras captured. There will be, my building has multiple cameras, the building next to mine has multiple cameras, 990 Lounge will have multiple cameras, U.S. Bank has cameras protecting its customers there at the ATM station, and with the cameras at Hayward Station, this will be the most photographed intersection in the Bay Area. And I can tell you from police that come and use my video cameras on a regular basis that the relationship is sound and it's mutually beneficial. And then finally, it's representing a business community. I can tell you that retail doesn't work if you just keep a building empty hoping that something will come along. It's been decades, and we finally have a retailer willing to invest in a lighted property, and I ask that you consider allowing it to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Kim? Mr. Huggett?
Thank you. So the Chamber has, I'm assuming, several dozen downtown business owners that are members. So as you're talking to your members that own property or have businesses in the downtown, what are you hearing from them about the cannabis businesses that are being considered for the area? Are they excited? Are they nervous? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I would say the number one concern about downtown businesses in the 9 years that I've been there has been the Green Shutter Hotel. It's been the most significant detriment on economic development in the downtown area. I first came here in '86, so that's 33 years. I hate to be one of these people that throws the years around, but it is apparent that was a tremendous detriment in the economic development of the downtown area, and still is. In fact, that was the genesis of the downtown street parties, to bring people downtown with their families to not be intimidated by the issues that were created by the Green Shutter Hotel at the source of 2 to 3 fire calls a week, generally for overdose or law enforcement issues. So in that respect, we're delighted for what's going on there. In terms of the dispensary issue, the idea that we're going to have improved security, that they have a parking space in between the Funky Monkey and the current location, the fact that there will be additional security in the area. I haven't seen it to be an issue at all, and I believe Mr. Antonini has done a poll of his own that he'll share with you as well to indicate that in terms of the business community, it hasn't been, this has not been an issue.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Antonini.
Madam Mayor and Council, just a couple of on the.
Oh, pull it down, the mic. Pull it down, yeah, so we can hear you. Okay.
Madam Mayor and Council, Just to follow up on the students, I know Stellar Academy at 913 B Street, a building that I have a mortgage on. In the packet that I left for each council person, you have a letter from that principal stating that his students do not basically come in front of 10004B, that they in fact commute from out of town and use BART in the bus station. Another thing that I think Hayward Station was a little embarrassed to admit, because they were approved by this council and spoke very nicely and questioned very diligently on 7/17/18 by Ms. Marquez and Mr. Zemeno, who was very pleased that that building would be occupied since it's been vacant for 24 years since I've owned it from a full-time tenant. And I believe you said, Mr. Zemeno, since 78 when you first came to his Hayward. And we're very excited about having it done. And then, because John Stefanski announced that they, in fact, had a building, and they signed an LOI with me, which prevented me from doing anything with that building during the process that we knew would take a while. And it did, and staff worked diligently with them to get it approved. And there were a lot of changes, a lot of added things they were asked to do, and they spent between $100,000 and $150,000 and maybe more going through that process. And then to be denied, and me being denied after yelling at them about how fast you're going with the city, very shocking, and that's why we want you, one of the main reasons why we want you to reconsider. However, on what Kim was saying, I also have in your packet actually 59 signatures from business owners, 3 of which are property owners and 1 is mine. There's at least 10 that I spoke to on the phone but couldn't catch up with them to get an endorsement. Some of these business owners only come in once in a while, or their schedules didn't meet mine. On top of that, and the business owners, it's important because this business is 9 to 9. They will have people coming in. They'll have lunch. They'll go to the bars. We don't have daytime traffic downtown. This will do that all day long. But as important is 550 citizens that signed this in the downtown area. And that was taken in just a few days. I mean, they were all for it. And if you read the caption on it, it takes into account almost everything the city said. I know you got the 7/17 meeting, and hopefully you had a chance to read it. I know I got a nice response from you, Francisco, Mr. Zemeno. I appreciate that. I got a nice response from you, Ms. Wahab. And that's really important. And if you want to go to, it was mentioned, this downtown thing. If you go to what I sent you there and did some highlighting on it, you can see one business owner that has 3 shops, his big write-up. I think everyone wants it. The biggest thing, though, you also have is you have a 1-year process. If they don't perform, if they don't make it one of these show places in downtown, if there is problems with security, if there's problems with youth, you can shut them down in a year. Now, I'm the property owner. I would like that. However, if they don't do their job, I would like that.
Okay, and you know with that, I do have to ask, because your time is up, but I think we've got the point. Does anyone have any? I would like to ask you something. I would like to ask you about your plans for the second story of the building, since that is not involved in this project.
One of our requirements with our commitment with Hayward Station is that we would repaint the second story, except for the back. They intend to put a sign on the back half stating Hayward Station, and we'll put new blinds up. Hopefully we won't have the broken windows anymore, and we will, I don't know if you've ever been up there, it's quite nice upstairs.
Okay, I haven't. I wondered.
You should come up. We've redone it and it's original. All the wood has been stained and looks beautiful. The only thing is, and my wife tells me, and everyone will support, I'm a paper junkie, so you'll see boxes of files that go back 20 years.
I couldn't really, I couldn't make any negative comment about that, since I'm guilty of the same thing.
You're welcome to visit whenever you like.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I don't see any, so thank you.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that the other 4 people that are not going to come back up and speak at this point. So I have no further questions. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council on this item? Yes, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Timothy Tuck. In 1996, California passed the Compassionate Use Act. California overwhelmingly voted to legalize cannabis for recreational use in 2018. In the process, the state, counties, and even Hayward decided 30% taxes was more important than the well-being of all the people who need this plant to stay alive. Prescription drugs aren't taxed. Your chemo won't be taxed. But if chemo starts to do you in, to fight back, and try to stay alive, you'll be taxed to do so. Patients need access, not more taxes. I watched all of the past council meetings, and every time I heard the bank building mentioned. The taxes we will have to continue to fight until cannabis is as free as tomatoes. It's medicine. It's not a drug. I've watched it save lives. This club is needed by patients, by the community, and by all who voted for this act. I would like you to reflect on how we got here. Compassion. As someone who makes medical cannabis products, the argument about we have to think of the children, we do. And I've watched it save lives. Your fears are unfounded. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Okay, with that, I'm going to close public. Oh, I see someone coming forward. And please state your name.
Hi, Brian Roy. Hi, I'd like to say that, as most of you may know, my family owns the Eric's Deli Cafe down the street, and being a business owner, I felt very welcomed.
Excuse me a minute. Sir, the man who has just left, could you please come up and see our city clerk and fill out a card? Thank you. And could you do the same when you're done? I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
So I felt very welcome. My family felt very welcomed. I could have never foresaw how the community would embrace and support me. And I feel that any business, especially something that we don't have downtown, deserves a chance to feel that embrace and welcome. And with the support I've gotten from the community, it's helped my business. And I feel like I said, anybody who wants to do something like that by opening a business deserves a chance to feel the embrace of the community like I did. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else coming forward? Yes, okay. Don't forget the card you were going to fill out for our city clerk.
Madam Mayor, City Council and staff, thank you. I've been here all my life. We're 22620 Mission Boulevard, Eden Jewelry on the corner of B and Mission. I've seen a lot of greatness down here in the 70s and 80s, and sort of became stagnant until now, and the economy's doing quite well. I'm not a user. I mean, I just want to eliminate another vacant building. These gentlemen are willing to spruce up Mr. Antonini's property, and I think give it a shot with restrictions, adequate security cameras, and so on and so on. That's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My apologies, I'm not prepared with a statement, but this is part of...
And you can state your name again. I know
Oh,
you said
sorry.
it earlier.
My name is Tim Romano Pugh. I work with the Eden Youth and Family Center with the Hayward Coalition for Healthy Youth. I don't have, or my program doesn't have an opinion on, recreational cannabis or, where it is. We strictly focus on how cannabis affects youth and access to youth. So there are many well-researched issues that the developing brain faces when it's using cannabis under the age of 18, even under the age of 21. There's a marked decrease in academic performance. There are different pathways don't necessarily get developed the way that they should, and it could have a negative effect on the individual going into adulthood. We also know that cannabis use, regular cannabis use, could lead to addiction in the future. We also know that cannabis use makes it more likely for regular cannabis use in youth, makes it more likely for that individual to have substance abuse issues in the future. So again, sorry for not being prepared, but just because one of our topics in the Hayward Coalition for Healthy Youth is cannabis, and that is something that we're addressing. We just want to make sure whatever happens that this is well known, and however we can get this message across that while cannabis is legal, we don't want it in the hands of youth. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? You did not speak before, so. Yes, I know. You're Mr.
Rodriguez?
Which one?
Miguel Rodriguez?
Rodriguez. Oh, yeah, Miguel. Okay.
I just kind of want to speak to the fact that the gentleman just touched on, and I think that the only way to prevent kids from getting it is to regulate it and tax it and take the black market out of the equation, because cannabis in schools and high schools are an issue that has been prevalent before the passage of Prop 215 in '96, and it's been there since I was in high school, and the best way to get it out is to regulate it and take it out of the hands of the black market, because the black market doesn't check for IDs. The black market doesn't care if you're 21, 18, 16, or 12 years old. So the only way to truly look out for the kids is to regulate this and get it above board so it's not a black market thing. And I don't think the youth has ever had a problem acquiring cannabis since the 70s in California. So I think it would be good for us to actually join forces with a program like this and somehow come up with a way that we can donate money in order to create an awareness and prevention for the youth to stay away from it. Because I completely agree, as a father of 4 kids, one in high school and one in diapers, the last thing we want is to mess with the youth's brain, my kids included. So any way we can partner with a place like that would be great for the youth and for us to show that this is something that needs to not be abused, and this is something that shouldn't be in children's hands unless needed. There are times with kids with epilepsy and seizures and different things where there's special circumstances, but I think the only way to get it out of their hands is to have this license regulated, cameras monitoring it, the BCC, the Bureau of Cannabis, inspecting us and monitoring our cameras. That's how you're going to keep kids away from it, not the opposite, not by alienating the industry. I think we are all on the same page, and as a father of 4, I just want it to be noted that our goals are aligned and the same. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, come on forward.
No tengo nada original para decirles, pero solamente vengo a decirles que tengan compasión con las personas que rentamos. Realmente hace 44 años que yo llegué a este país, era un país donde no había tanto carro, donde se pagaban, yo pagué $85 por...
Sorry, we might have to revisit a couple of this. So I don't have anything original per se here to tell you, but I just want you to have compassion for those of us that rent here. 44 years ago when I came to this country, it was a very different country. There weren't as many cars.
$85. Soy una persona muy activa tratando de ayudar a la comunidad. por mi renta.
Back when I arrived, I paid $85 for my rent, and I'm a person that's very active in trying to help the community.
Ahora estamos perdiendo niños, familias, personas de mayores de tercera edad porque no ponen atención que de verdad estamos viviendo una crisis tan dura y las familias se están perdiendo.
And we're losing families and children, older age people, to this crisis, and we're losing it.
Y quiero mucho a Hayward.
And I love Hayward.
Pero las familias se están moviendo y me da tristeza las escuelas.
But the families are leaving and the schools make me sad.
I think okay, go ahead and finish, but...
Y que hagan algo por las familias que verdaderamente no podemos ya más vivir en Hayward.
And please do something for the families that we really can't live here anymore.
Las rentas son demasiado altas.
The rent is too high.
Y por favor, pongan atención cuántos niños se están moviendo y los niños no se concentran porque sus padres no tienen dinero para pagar su renta.
And there are students that are leaving because their parents don't have the time to pay attention to them because they're working to pay the rent.
Es muy duro, muy duro. Por favor, pongan atención sobre control de rentas. Por favor,
please take into consideration the rent control issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you can let her know that we actually just did that. There you go, but thank you. Okay. So is there anyone else now who would like to speak on item number 3 regarding the resolution for denial of proposed cannabis retail dispensary? And seeing no one coming forward at this point, I'm going to close public comment on this, entertain comments, questions, a motion from County Council Member Salinas.
Thank you. What I wanted to do was go ahead and move council or staff's report, adoption of resolution of denial for proposed cannabis retail dispensary at 1004 B Street.
I'll second that motion. Councilmember Mendel.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to reconsider their votes from last time. I know this is new. I know it's a little nervous about it because it is a new industry. We're right to be nervous about it, and that's why we've been so, I think, careful and thorough in putting in place really strong regulations to make sure that the businesses that we do approve will be run well. And we don't have to trust that they'll be run well. We'll be able to force them to be run well or shut them down. Those are the regulations we put in place, and there was a reason for that. Hayward Station was the highest scoring applicant in the retail space, the highest scoring applicant. They're willing to put $500,000 into a building that's been vacant for a very, very, very long time. The amount of security there is going to be fantastic. And I would just, to put it in a frame of reference, imagine if the requirements they were putting on this business we could put on every single business that sells tobacco in town. That they had to have 24-hour security, that they had to check IDs at the door, that no one under 21 is let in, that they had security cameras all over the building that were available at a moment's notice that the police could look in on at any time, that they would be inspected every single year, and that we could put them out of business every single year if they violate the rules we put in place. I wish we had some of those rules in place for our tobacco retailers. We do have those rules in place for our cannabis retailers. And I think we can trust that. Trust the rules. Trust the process we've gone through. Let these businesses open. And if you are not run well, we will shut you down. If you are run well, you are welcome as long as that is the case. And I hope that some of you who voted against this last time will reconsider and change your vote tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Wahab.
I actually made a motion request, but it didn't work.
Yeah,
no worries. I actually do reconsider my stance on it. I'm going to be honest, and I've told the owners, the businessmen that are sitting in front of us, that the presentation made to us last time was very poorly done. The questions were poorly answered, and in further conversation, I believe that they realized that as well. I think that's why a majority of us felt obligated to reject them. I will say that as a person with a conservative background and concerns, and have never been a proponent of cannabis or anything else for the most part, I will say that I actually did do some research and took a tour of a cannabis industry and was pleasantly surprised to the point where I actually have been talking about it for a week now. And the amount of security, and I'm not saying that all businesses are made the same, but the amount of security that these businesses have, from the moment you enter the door to the surveillance cameras, to the fact that they pay their workers a livable wage, and are trying to invest in a blighted building that is actually one of the nicest buildings to look at from outside, that we definitely want to maintain. It just goes to show that this is an industry that is in the dark. We know that this has been one of the shadiest industries, and the law that was passed by Californian voters allows for these industries to come into the light, be heavily regulated. Each city take the precaution that we are trying to, push on to regulate these businesses. And I agree with Councilmember Mendel on if we could do this to some of the other industries. I think all of us would be happy. And to be quite clear, I think alcohol does far more damage to families. But with that said, I actually would support this business, so I will be voting no on this particular motion and making a motion of my own.
Okay, and I will call on you and, get her, Councilmember, on you on too, because okay, Councilmember Lamden.
Sorry, we're doing a little process conversation up here. Okay. You can't hit me to tell her to, sorry, I can't reach you over there. Okay. Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to sort of echo the eloquent comments of my two colleagues. I think that's well said, and I would add alcohol into that conversation about how do we regulate businesses, et cetera. And I would also encourage us to remember that on B Street, High Scores Arcade got called out, but it's also a vintage gaming thing. I mean, people my age are there because of the nostalgia factor. Kids are going to the movie theater. Kids are going to T4. It is we have worked hard for our community, all parts of our community, to be welcoming to everybody in our community. And I think that means that there are people who want to buy either for adult use or medical use cannabis, and if it's regulated well, I don't see it as a problem any more than I do any other well-regulated, well-run business. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Zermino.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation also. This is a difficult one for me. I've always supported the will of the folks who voted for this in California and in Hayward. At first, we did approve a very good process for cannabis, 3 dispensaries in downtown Hayward. And in my mind, it was very good. It's a good idea. One over in the Reptile Room, one over by Upper B Street, close to 2nd, and then this one. And then this one I began to think. All right, so Mr. Huggett said, we're working on an entertainment district. We want our downtown to be entertainment. However, when you purchase this particular product, you don't consume it on site. You go elsewhere for medicinal or other purposes. So that's a loss. Then, of course, the building needs work. It needs a lot of work, and unfortunately, there hasn't been a will to fix the building these last 38 years. Let's see. And my other problem is, this is our best street. B Street is our most precious, beautiful street. People did not go to the green shutter because of the element. I'm not saying that this particular place will have that element, but now we have folks downtown, so I'm still really undecided on this, and I suppose I will figure out within the next 5 minutes whether I'll go yes or no, but it's a very difficult choice for me. I see more negatives than I do positives. I have spoken to the owner of the business, suggested A Street, Upper B Street, etc. In your balancing act, in my balancing act, the minute that something goes wrong with the place, it could be shut down, and that's something that alleviates my concerns. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll see how I vote in the next 30 minutes or the next 30 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Salinas.
Thank you. Well, I've listened, and, I just want to state for the record, and I've said this before, and I think the applicants are good people. I think, Mr. Doherty, I know you're a good guy. We met, and I know, I know Mr. Antonini, and I know your family. I know, you're good people, and so I don't want to, certainly don't want to give the impression that I am alienating the cannabis industry, because I'm not. But let me just give just make some points that I made before, but I'll make them a little bit more succinctly, just to give you an idea about the way I feel and why I'm taking the position that I am. One is, when I did not vote for Proposition, the last one was at 64 or whatever it was. And the reason why I did not support Proposition 64 was because I suspected that cities and communities that cannabis would be implemented in the dispensaries would be disproportionately communities of color, right? I did not see cities like Moraga. I did not see cities like Orinda, Alamo, jumping at the bit to bring cannabis. In fact, the county today has 3 dispensaries, and 2 of them are in Ashland. Ashland community, the one community in Alameda County that has some of the worst health risk factors in the county. And today, there's 2 of them in there, right? And 2 of those cannabis dispensaries are within a very close proximity to our downtown. So, in the event that this dispensary opens, and let's say the other dispensary opens, within a 2-mile radius of downtown Hayward, we'll have potentially 5 dispensaries within downtown Hayward. Foothill, Llewellyn, and then we have the 2 here, 4, right? And so what we're seeing is an oversaturation of dispensaries in Hayward, and particularly in one neighborhood of Hayward. The exact same scenario that I suspected that would happen when Prop 64 passed, you see. So that's the first reason. Secondly is, it's where it's located, in downtown. I think Councilmember Cermeño is correct. I think he's right on this. Of all the places that we could potentially put this, we're putting this in arguably in the premier corner of our city, right? And in terms of economic development, and I'm not knocking the 2 existing retailers that are in downtown Hayward right now, but we also have one of our most busiest corners in downtown Hayward right now. We have 2 photocopy places right across the street from each other that do the same thing. Photocopies and document reproduction. And that's our key economic development corridor, right? And so it's like, what are we doing in terms of our downtown? You know, this building has been empty for 20-something years, 24 years. And I just can't imagine that this is the best and highest use for this spot. And so putting that aside, lastly, I have spent my career working with families and working with kids in the city. In fact, my entire career. And every day I go to work and I work with parents. And I work with the high school kids, high school students, the same students that have stood up here and talked to us. And a few years ago, they came up with they did an inventory of tobacco and liquor outlets in the city of Hayward. And they inventoried over 140, I think it was 146. 146 liquor stores and tobacco stores in the city. It's easier to get cigarettes and liquor in the city than it is to buy an apple in the city. And now we're adding cannabis. And so when we ask why my friends who I went to high school with, when they graduated from high school, they said, oh my God, I can't wait to get out of Hayward. I'm gonna move to Castro Valley. I'm gonna move to Pleasanton. As sort of the marker of stepping up. That's why they're doing that. That's why they said it. It's because of what we have done from this dais. So, I will be voting yes on this. I hope my colleagues vote yes on this also. And to the gentleman about the medicinal use, I agree with you. I believe there's medical benefits. I know that. I'm not a doctor, but I've said that before. But I think, particularly in proximity to downtown, I think we have enough. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and call the vote on this motion, which is to adopt a resolution of denial with the findings that the staff has attached here. So with that, I will call for the vote. What? And the motion fails to pass with 2 aye votes and 4 no votes. Councilmember Wahab?
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to actually approve this location for this business. And I hope that all of you guys understand there's a couple of things that are at play here. One, we understand that downtown is the area that we focus on to ensure that our city has a vibrant downtown and is moving forward, if you will, and possibly even revisiting this option of having each of the retail businesses in downtown may be something for further discussion if need be. We have approved cannabis in the city and in the state by the majority of voters, and we need a business up and running. We are wasting a lot of time by nitpicking and not letting them fail if they were to fail. And in business, you try it, you fail, and you learn, and you move forward. And as we've heard, a lot of our concerns the previous time they presented were addressed. Children will be protected due to the security measures. I myself have actually toured a facility, was quite impressed myself. If any violation of our laws happen, we will revoke the permit. And I think that you guys were made well aware that this is an immediate pull for any violation. And I genuinely believe that we need to understand that society is changing and people deserve to have a safe place to locally purchase their item of choice and make that decision for themselves. So I hope that you guys can just say yes and let's move forward.
So, anyone want to speak to it?
I do, yes. Second motion, and I want to make sure, if the maker is okay with it, that we include the community benefit condition that I was outlining the last time, which was add a condition that would require them to contribute 1% of revenue to the Hayward Community Foundation unless some alternative agreement can be reached between the city and the applicant. So that creates some room for them to do something different if we're okay with it.
And if you guys remember the last time that it was stated, and you stated this in some of your comments earlier, that a minimum of 1% was just the bare minimum, and we hope to see you guys invest in the city even further. So I am fine with this.
Thank you very much.
All right, Councilmember Landon.
Thank you. One other small addition is on the conditions of approval, the findings for approval. There's a small typo, item C. It says manufacturing use, and what should it be?
Retail.
Retail. Okay, so the maker and second.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, our proof reader, Councilmember Landon.
It's a family trait. And then I just wanted to disclose that I did meet with the applicants, obviously, earlier than this, but also since our meeting on the 28th, and have visited businesses as well. And I'm pleased to support this motion. Thank you.
Okay. And I'll acknowledge too that I did meet with the applicants. It didn't immediately change my mind. However, I too, like Councilmember Zermino, was conflicted about this. We have a chance to have some restoration and improvement in the appearance of a very prominent building in our downtown, a historic building. This wouldn't be the use I would choose for it. But we have put a program in place that has a lot of protection for the city in case there are problems. And having met actually with the I've met both with Mr. Antonini, the building owner, and also with separately with the Hayward Station people. And I think that they had convinced me that they have been involved in very responsible businesses in other places, and and so I think with all the protections that we have in place. And obviously dealing with some responsible business owners, and I'm hoping that Mr. Antonini, that you'll continue to invest in your property and to keep it up, it will bring some security to that area. There are additional eyes on the street, probably feet on the street. I tend to think this is not going to be the kind of businesses that will promote a lot of other, that will help a lot of the other businesses in downtown, but I could be wrong about that too. So at this point, I will go ahead and probably support this motion with the rest of the council. Councilmember Salinas? I'm sorry, because he's not, sorry. You're next. Councilmember Zermino.
My tablet is stacking up. I'm a Libra, so as I was considering and weighing everything, it was completely balanced. And the one thing that threw in favor of a yes vote is finally seeing this building be restored to its glory. I think that's the only thing, that's what really convinced me. Unfortunately, that there was no will to fix the broken windows up, before, and has to wait till now. That's kind of sad. So I think that is going to be, that is one thing that convinced me of it. So we will see how you folks do. Hopefully you will do well. And let's bring that corner to some kind of a good, superb setting that we deserve, I think. Across the street is the Green Shutter, with that Jeff has done a tremendous job, and I'm hoping that you folks will do too. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And Councilmember Salinas.
Thank you. I will be voting no on this, but I just wanted to point out that exactly what has happened up and down the state of California, we're doing it tonight. We're sticking this industry, this dispensary, we're sticking it all in one neighborhood, and that's the downtown neighborhood. And so if this was such a viable business or such a great retail idea, then how come the Hayward Hills doesn't have it? How come Stonebridge doesn't have it? Or how come Eden Shores doesn't have it, right? And so on behalf of all the families in downtown Hayward and all the kids, thank you.
All right, and with that, I will call for the vote. And the motion passes with 5 aye votes and 1 no vote. Thank you all. And we will now move on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is Public Tax and Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act, TAFRA hearing, which is required by the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, and adoption of a resolution approving the issuance of California's statewide Communities Development Authority tax. Oh, before we go on with that, sorry, we will bring back our council member, Councilmember Marquez. Sorry. Did you want to participate in item number 6? No, as we go, yeah. Sorry, just get up. All right, so are we ready?
Sorry.
All right. We're back now. Now we're going to go to this item number 6, a TAFRA hearing to adopt a resolution approving the issuance of California Statewide Communities Development Authority of tax-exempt bonds to finance the acquisition, construction, and development of the Maple and Main apartment project. And we will start, I think, with Deputy City Manager Ott. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Jennifer Ott, Deputy City Manager, and staff is recommending tonight that you approve a resolution moving forward or approving the issuance of tax-exempt multifamily housing bonds to finance the first phase of the Maple and Main project, which includes 240 units of affordable housing, 20% of which would be restricted to very low-income households. It would be for $110 million for development of that first phase. There is a second phase of the project that is not subject to this hearing tonight, which is the renovation or rehabilitation of the office building, or the 48,000 square feet. That's not part of this project or not part of this action tonight. And it is a TAFRA hearing. It's required in order for the developer to move forward with issuance of these bonds, these tax-exempt bonds. And there's no liability to the city. The city has no obligation to pay these back. So it's really an action that really helps put the developer in the best position to get financing for their apartment project, the first phase of that project. Blake Peters with the development company, Maple and Main Apartments LP, is here tonight if you have questions about the project. And then we're here, obviously, to answer any questions about this hearing. I'm sorry, Christina's correcting me. 240 apartment units, 20% of which is about 48 very low-income units. So certainly not 240 all affordable units. So 240 total units, with 48 being restricted to very low-income households.
Okay. Councilmember Mendel?
Thank you, Mayor. So when the entitlements for this project were approved, I and I think others, I know others on the council, spoke very favorably of the commercial component that is now being referred to as Phase 2. I think I and a couple others said that we wouldn't be voting for it without that piece. And so I'm a little troubled now that the housing component is going to come first. So convince me that we will have the leverage necessary to ensure that the commercial component is completed.
Well, you want to start? I was just going to say you can ask the applicant that question.
Well, I'm asking staff because the applicant can make promises, but I want to hear from staff what leverage do we have to hold them.
So they're actually, and I believe we discussed this with several council members, they're actually going to be coming back to the council this fall for a redo of the phase 2 component of the project and an amendment to their conditional use permit. So phase 2, as it was originally contemplated, will not be happening in the same way. And so, I think there's a consideration for the council on whether you want to go ahead and continue to move forward with this component while they go through the approval process for the new application for phase 2 and the redo of phase 2.
So if we move forward with this tonight, they could in theory build phase 1 and just stop.
Yes, that is a possibility. They could just they wouldn't change if they didn't come in and to amend the use permit, they could just finish phase 1 and stop there, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add one thing, there's no action that you're taking tonight influences or changes your ability to vote on that future action. So that is still a discretionary action of the council at a future date. So nothing here precludes you from taking whatever action you want to on phase 2. I don't know if that clarifies or not. And this also includes 5,500 square feet of commercial space in the ground floor. So there is a commercial component as part of phase 1.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. In the staff report, it indicates that if we approve this tonight, the deed restriction would be for 55 years for affordability. Was there any discussion in doing it in perpetuity?
The issuance of the bonds are not with the city of Hayward, so the regulatory agreement will be with the state of California for the low-income housing tax credit, so that's the term that's required by that funding source.
Can we do we have any authority to request more years or request a perpetuity? What's our role?
Actually, so in compliance with the Affordable Housing Ordinance, the 20%, since it is one of the conditions of approval, could be restricted in perpetuity consistent with the Affordable Housing Ordinance, and it would be memorialized in the regulatory agreement with the project.
Okay, so we'd have to ask the applicant if they're amenable to that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Salinas. Okay, Councilmember Zermino.
I share my colleague Mendel's preoccupation, and then also I add to that all of a sudden now we're not going to be even using the hospital to do offices, that was another reason that I was appealing. Next I'll know they're going to kill the tree that we're trying to save. So I'm not sure if I like that. We could do this, they could build the one phase, and then thank you very much, and that's it. I like to see some kind of a language, I don't know if it's possible, that say, if we do this for you, then you have to do this for us. And as it was, the retail was not going to be that great. I mean, 5,500 feet for the phase 1, and I can't remember what it was for phase 2, but I would love to see some retail across the street from Cobbler's, for example. And then, of course, this A Street is beautiful. It's a way to expand our retail area. And then, of course, there's a new building that was right behind on Main Street. Very nice building that could be a restaurant. There should be something across the street. So that's where I am. Maybe we can ask the project manager or owner about it.
Okay, thank you. I I don't have any other, okay, Councilmember Salinas.
So if I understand the city manager correctly, if we pause this until and delay it till the fall, they will come back with the phase 2, and we can decide. Explain.
So the challenge with this is if the council doesn't approve this, the TEFRA hearing, sometime in the next few weeks, they could lose their tax allocation, which would then prevent them from financing the affordable housing units in phase 1. So that's the predicament that we're in. This is my understanding from the applicant and from staff. They are in the process of getting ready to submit the revisions to phase 2 that would be coming to council for approval in the fall. I don't know if we can. I guess the council could approve the TEFRA hearing. I'll have to let me talk to the city attorney here, but, conditioned on, the application being completed for phase 2. And there's maybe some language we could, if the council is concerned about moving forward with phase 1 without phase 2 being completed. So let me just confer with the city attorney on that for a moment or two.
Yeah, do that. And I don't know who else. I know Councilman Mendel was here and Sir Manuel was here and Halliday was here. But when this came to us, what we wanted, and in fact, I think the whole project was actually in limbo. Not in limbo, but we were actually debating to kill the project because we didn't want to let go of the commercial element, if I'm not mistaken. And I make that point because it was a very lively discussion that we had up here, and I think it might have been, I don't know if my history is right now, but it might have been Mayor Sweeney was here, and I think he wasn't here. Okay. Anyway, I just remember a voice that was very firm and stern on it. But anyway, my point is that we had a very lively discussion up here regarding the economic development, because I think this also came along with other projects where we did not want to let go, and we were very firm on ground level commercial and developing in phase, and because this is the whole issue what we had with Eden Shores too, by the way. And so anyways, I just wanted to make that point. And I don't know if I need to keep talking so that the city manager can keep talking, but I can keep talking. But anyways.
I do have a question about that phase, the commercial in phase 1. I think it originally was located along Main Street, but didn't we ask that it be moved to Maple Court? Or am I just imagining that?
I wasn't here for that discussion, but I know there is retail on Maple Court side.
On Maple Court side, yeah, that's right. We had it moved over there. Okay, thank you for that. So are there other council questions right now, or can I open the public?
Oh, okay. City manager asked it, confirming with the applicant some just information, but we're gonna, if he wants to respond to maybe some of the council questions if you want to open the public hearing and do that, and then
I don't have a card from the applicant, so perhaps we could start with that. But meanwhile, I do have a card from Alicia Lawrence. So, Alicia, why don't you go ahead? Let's see.
Good evening, Alicia Lawrence, Hayward Collective. So this past Sunday evening, the Hayward Collective was invited to a tenant meeting at a building that will be utilizing LIHTC funding. And I'm here this evening to encourage and ask you all to evaluate your policies and see how you can strengthen your regulatory authority over LIHTC properties in our community, because we've already seen 808 A Street, where the for-profit developer, while acting legally, was taking advantage of those community members when they issued an 11% rent increase, and the city had to intervene. At the property that we were at Sunday night, while thus far we don't see that anything is being illegal, it is still unethical what is transpiring at that property. And so, and while I understand you can't create a policy that targets for-profit developers only, you can, craft policy that just states the expectation of how these businesses are supposed to operate when they come into our city. So, you know, we just want to ensure that when it comes to the LIHTC funding, that the spirit and intention of that funding is actually being adhered to, and that tenants are not the ones who end up being taken advantage of. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have the developer or Sot?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that it might be good for the applicant to come up in terms of so that the council can hear from the applicant directly about the project and the sustainability of the project if this doesn't move forward.
Thank you. Mayor Halliday, nice to see you again. Members of the council, nice to see you as well. This has been a very, very difficult project for everyone involved. It's been very painful for a number of people here, and it continues to be right now. Honestly, when we were first entitled, it was as a 20% affordable project, as a bond project, and we were very happy to report that we had a bond allocation from the state, which we still do. The problem that we've run into is that as most projects have that have gone to the state for bond funding or anything else around the Bay Area at this point, the construction costs have really just gotten so out of control that it's made a number of projects financially infeasible. So we've gone through numerous iterations for this project, even looking at redoing it as a for sale project, worked with staff to analyze it as a for sale project, completely redoing the affordable component. We were going to bring that back to you and felt that that would not be palatable. And so we've done everything we've been able to do to keep it as a 20% affordable project as was originally entitled, maintain that allocation, and close on those bonds. You have to understand, we're talking about commercial and phase two and everything. You know, phase two really almost doesn't happen if there's no phase one. We'd reevaluate the entire property at that point if we were to lose this bond allocation. The bond allocation, we've been extended 4 times now. The most I'd ever heard before that was 2 extensions. We've now gotten 4 from SIDLAC, the State Bond Allocation Committee. And as I hear, there are a number of other projects that are in the same boat. So we're getting one last extension from SIDLAC, which we've just received, which takes us to August 4th. That's it. As of August 4th, if we don't close the bonds on this project, then we lose the $110 million in bond allocation. And we not only do we not build the 240 units, we certainly don't build the 48 affordable units. And we'd have to really reevaluate an entire new plan for the entire property. So this has been approved twice, and believe me, it's embarrassing to have to come back for a 3rd TEFRA hearing on any project. But all we're asking you to do at this point is to approve what's already been approved twice. The TEFRA allows us to sell the bonds, and we have about 45 days to be able to do that, or else this entire project goes away. So that's the importance of, you know, a week or 2 right now. We're extending it into the fall. That's the timeline that we're under. So just wanted to be very clear about that. So we appreciate anything that you could do to work with us on this one last extension.
Okay, does anyone have any questions of him? Councilmember Mendel.
So you heard this is going to be a question. So you heard the implied concerns about the commercial building.
Yes.
You remember the hearings, you remember we met before you came to the first hearing, and you heard me talk about the importance of the commercial component, the commercial office component, and I am worried about it now. And so what would you suggest we do to convince me that we're not going to approve this or whatever, you know, revision to the CUP that comes back, and then you just build the housing without redoing the commercial office component, which is also needed?
Well, frankly, there isn't anything. Not that that's ever the intent, but as I'm just thinking through it, mechanically, you can deny us in the future coming back with a revision to the CUP to ask for housing over resident or housing over commercial or some combination thereof, or all residential in place of the 4-story commercial building. You could always just deny us that. And the current entitlement allows for a redevelopment, a rehab of the existing 4-story medical office building. That's all it allows us to do. So I guess really two questions. I understand your word. Are you trying to protect it and make sure that it stays all commercial, or that?
Yes.
Well, okay, so two different questions. That's one aspect of it, and then the other is, well, how do you assure that if we do get the bond sale, we do sell the bonds in 45 days, we move forward with the 240 units? What is the mechanism to make us finish that out within a certain amount of time? The interesting part about this is that the reason there's no mechanism, if you go back, and I believe me, I appreciate it, commercial was a huge topic during the entitlement process. I will say, looking back on it and looking back through the documentation, there's a reason that there was no condition of approval saying what the 4-story building could be. There was no condition that it even remains commercial. The focus, for whatever reason during that time, I kept saying, hey, we're retaining this building. It's all commercial, when all the focus was on whether we have 3,000 or 5,000 along Main Street and whether we'd put a little on Maple Court and that sort of thing. And I thought that the retention of that medical office building was really sort of lost. And there was no requirement of anything to be done on that except that it would be rehabbed to look like the new buildings. So I was always, during that process, I always thought that we didn't get enough credit, frankly, for the fact that there was going to be a building retained there, and there was no condition to do that. There was no condition in the condition of approval to do that. So I think that's an interesting point in hindsight, that what we were asked to do kind of 11th hour with Mr. Lewis was to accommodate some changes there, was to move some commercial from Main Street over to Maple Court. So we got commercial on both sides. And I certainly understand that. We talked all about that. So we did that, accomplished that. And certainly anything that we did along this, or anything that we do along Maple Court, all that, we're looking at as a commercial corridor at this point. Main Street, we'll see how that leases up. But to answer your question, I'm not sure if there is a mechanism in place currently, because there was no condition on what that ultimately would be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the long response.
Councilmember Lamnon.
Process question. Maybe this is for the applicant. Maybe it's for staff. We'll see. So while we may have overlooked a condition of approval, it was certainly, I was sitting here too, and it was absolutely an understanding and a selling point for the project that was going to be office space. So I'm concerned. I had the same concern that my colleagues did about separating this project and now having this dual timeline. So walk me through, because maybe I missed it. So do you have 45 days as of right now without this TEFRA hearing to the August deadline you mentioned?
That's correct. Our SIDLAC extension run is through August 3rd.
Okay. And then this TEFRA hearing is to extend it until when?
Technically, this TEFRA hearing, I believe, extends it 1 year, but it's really, for all intents and purposes, it's a 45-day extension, because after August 3rd, there is no other reason to have a TEFRA. So I just mean that is the extenuating circumstance here. The TEFRA, I believe, extends for 1 year. Is that correct? I think so.
The August, whose deadline is the August 3rd?
State of California. The California Debt Limit Allocation Committee. They revert the bonds at that point. The $110 million in bonds reverts back to the state, and it'll yet to be determined if that gets rolled over into future allocation rounds for other projects, or if it gets lost back to the Fed.
Okay. I appreciate that. What I'm trying to get at, and I'll stop here and allow this to, close the public hearing and go on to the conversation, is do we have any flexibility on our timeline in terms of being able to, if we don't do the TEFRA hearing tonight, but I realize we can't wait until the fall, so can we step up your, phase 2 so that we get what we need to hear? So that's the sort of question I'm trying to understand in my head and all.
That would be really, I'm just going to speak for our development services staff. They haven't submitted their application for the revised CUP, and we have to do environmental review, and so there's no way that we could make that timeline work under legal parameters.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier, I asked staff a question with regard to maintaining those 48 units affordable in perpetuity. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Obviously, it's a good concept or a good idea and concept. Where the 55 years comes from is the bond compliance period, and so that's a state-mandated bond compliance period from SIDLAC, whereas TCAC, the tax credits are a 15-year compliance period, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but so the 55-year compliance period is dictated by the SIDLAC and TCAC regulations. I don't believe our lenders, this project has been obviously very, very difficult to finance and we're trying to limp across the finish line and get this done. So adding another regulation on top that's out of the box is probably not something that we could accommodate at this point. We're really just trying to make sure that we are hoping and that we can bring this project to fruition at this point.
Thank you.
I'd just like to clarify, so according to our affordable housing ordinance, which you're using these units to comply with, or they'd be using, our ordinance requires in perpetuity. So there will need to be a regulatory agreement with the city, and that would be required as part of this project. In order for these units to count towards your affordable housing, consistent with our ordinance.
So they would be deed restricted in perpetuity.
Yes.
I have not seen that in our affordable housing ordinance or in the affordable housing agreement yet. We're in a draft agreement at this point. That was not in there previously.
That is.
But if that is under the ordinance, certainly we'd be in compliance with the
so you have a draft, because our division would be doing the draft agreement for the affordable housing ordinance. So we can talk about it, but our ordinance would require in perpetuity in order for it to comply with our ordinance.
Comply with the 20%, okay.
If that's the case and it is in the ordinance, then we certainly will be in full compliance.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Francisco, Councilmember Zervino.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really interested in making sure that the old hospital is not torn down.
It is not?
That it's not torn down. Eventually, I would like to see offices there because we're missing offices in our downtown. It's the lunch crowd is something that's kind of sparse. So if we had a nice office space there, I think it would help our downtown. So is that something you can discuss a little bit?
To clarify, so the entire property is the old Levine Hospital. Are you talking about
the 4-story
specifically the 4-story?
Right, on the corner of Maple and...
Okay, so the entire reason that we're talking about a second phase, if you will, for this project, it was always anticipated that we were going to come in with with plans for a renovation of the 4-story building. And at that time, we would have to come to you with plans for that and really get that approved as well, right? Moving forward with the second phase. Well, the entitlements as they sit now specifically call for a rehab of the existing building. Unfortunately, over the last 2-3 years, 2.5 years or so, the homeless in the area have taken over, as we all know. Started off with one part of the property, and eventually, I personally was coordinating the fight to try to keep the building sealed up and keep them out, and eventually even protect our last tenant that we had in the 4-story building. Eventually, they took over the entire complex as they have now, and the 4-story building, unfortunately. Not only did they cause an explosion in the basement that you might have heard a little bit about, there were several floods in the basement, and then they went through and tore out all the electrical conduit and every electrical piece in the electrical room, which was in the basement, which had already been flooded. My whole purpose for saying this is that it's been red tagged. The building is is beyond repair at this point. And so the reason that there is that there will be a proposal coming back of a modification of the existing entitlements is just that the existing entitlements only allow for rehab, and we're suggesting that we will be suggesting that taking that building down and building a new building in its place would be much more effective. Is really the only way to go at this point, given the condition of that building, the existing building. So that's what we'll be coming back for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Separate action.
Is there anyone else? Councilmember Salinas.
And in this proposal, is it going to be commercial?
So we have a couple different proposals that we have in the works, if you will, for the second phase. We're still looking for the right use on that second phase. We've always been looking for a tenant for that space. We were never able to find one. We went through every healthcare group, conglomerate you could possibly imagine. So we're looking at that building from all angles, and we'll bring it to you about what is feasible there, what can be done there. So I can't promise what the mix is going to be, or if it's going to be all commercial, or we're going to propose some residential with commercial. That's the second phase, and frankly, it really doesn't happen unless this first phase goes, because then the second phase we'd be doing a new building or a rehab of the existing building, which we can't do. So a new building next to a blighted property at this point.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Anyone? Okay. So I would like to close the public hearing on this item. And I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the staff recommendation on this. We've had some extensive discussion about phase 2. I realize none of us is happy that phase 2 is not going to go ahead, but I would like to remind everybody, I don't know about you all, but I have had an enormous amount of complaints from the people who live in that area about the condition of this property, and we need to move forward. This is the project we have. If we do not move forward with this, that site is going to remain the way it is, and it is going to continue to cause problems in our downtown for the people who live and work and try to do business around it. And so I feel very strongly we'll have the opportunity to discuss phase 2 when they come back, and we have already entitled it for one project, and we'll have to determine what can be done at that time. But I want to move forward with phase 1 so that we eliminate a very blighted area of our downtown that has been causing a lot of problems. Do I have a second to my motion? Okay, seconded by Councilmember Marquez. Councilmember Mendel.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to be supporting the motion. I'd be happy to have you come back in a couple weeks with some sort of side agreement, a surety bond, I don't know, I don't even care, that gives me confidence that that commercial building will get rehabbed or rebuilt as part of the eventual redevelopment. I don't have that confidence right now. That project, that building was, and my memory could be a little off here, but it was mostly occupied when it was taken over. There were tenants in there. I think part of the selling point was, look, it's occupied, we've got tenants, of course we want to keep it. We're just going to, fix it up so that it's good for another whatever years. And it wasn't 100% full, but it was significantly full. And it is degraded in the time that this company has owned it. And the problems that have existed there have occurred during the time that this company has owned it. And the tenants have all left during the time that this company has owned it. And yes, it's been a great source of frustration for us and the folks in the downtown. And the city has been working very hard to try and mitigate some of the problems there. And I'll just say that my experience with that process does not leave me with an abundance of confidence in that the developer can be counted on fully. So I want some assurance, and I'm not going to vote for this until I get some assurance that that second phase is going to get built. Hopefully some of my colleagues agree.
All right, Councilmember Lamnon.
Thank you.
Actually, yes, I'm sitting in the same place. I can't support it as it sits. I appreciate the work that was done to get us here tonight, and I appreciate the challenges. But those frustrations about the property, the city has had as well. Have any of the buildings come down?
Yes, a couple of this. Go ahead, Laura.
Yes, one of the single-family homes has been demolished.
But that's it?
Yes.
Okay. And we've been asking for that for months and months and months. We ended up having to pay for the security. I don't know where that sits, and I don't need to know tonight. But I have this same fear that as badly as we need housing, as badly as we need those affordable units, I am really not clear that this project is going to happen at all, and let alone in the way we envisioned it when we approved it. And so I appreciate the comment about, environmental review and so on, that there's some timeline here that is trying to be managed. But we've got one more month of meetings for this body, and I'd be willing to hear something that A, tells me that you're going to take care of the blight that's there right now, and two, the commercial, that the intent of the commercial gets honored. And so I can't support it yet. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Salinas.
If this is approved tonight, when will the remaining structures come down?
The applicants indicated that they would come back, submit a new application for an amendment to the use permit, and that process will take us into September to bring it back to council for consideration. If it were approved, then the demolition, the removal of that blight could happen immediately, or whatever time frame that the council requires with an amended use permit.
Like immediately, meaning what? Like tomorrow? Next week? Like,
Are you talking about phase 2 or phase 1?
I'm talking about phase 1.
Yeah, and
so I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, so I think what the applicant has indicated is they cannot they cannot demo the 4-story building without amending the use permit, because it's a requirement of the use permit at this point. So we cannot require them to do something that's a requirement.
Are you asking about the remaining buildings in phase 1? What are we looking at in the time?
Oh, in phase
frame
1
if we approve
itself,
this tonight?
that parcel only.
So
Thank you very much. The 2 points. The reason that the demolition is not actually allowed within 90 days of closing the bond sale. And so we thought that we were there so many times that we've been holding off. The demolition has been held off and held off and held off until we get the bond sale. So at this point, as soon as we have the bond sale, all the rest of the buildings come down except for the 4-story building. The second point is there have been 2 buildings demolished so far, 2 buildings on Maple Court. One was a single-family home, and one was the commercial building. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, she's absolutely right. We haven't taken the house down yet. It's just the commercial building on Maple Court. Last point is the only reason that all the tenants were allowed to move out of the 4-story building, it was all very intentional, all very transparent, is that we wanted to have, they were all on month-to-month leases so that they could all be vacated, and when we got the last tenant out, then we could do a rehab of the entire building. We weren't able to do, we talked to building about doing it in pieces, working around the existing tenant. We were working with the building department on that extensively, and police. So we really, that was the intent, was to have all the tenants move out, vacate the building, so that we could strip it all down to the basic core, the concrete core, then do a retrofit, a seismic retrofit against that core, which is the way you have to do it in order to retain the building as it is. That's the reason it was vacated.
Okay, so I want to back you up 20 steps. And the original question I asked was, in phase 1, And when, like, let's say we did this tonight, when will demolition occur with the existing, those existing like houses without the buildings? I know that's phase 2, but the housing that's along, say, there's a realtor there. When will those homes come down, or that?
So all the properties that are within the building footprint, within the footprint of the property, include 2 homes, one on Maple Court and one on McKeever. Both of those would come down as soon as we sell bonds, which it has to be by August 3rd, or else there is no bond sale after that. And so as soon as the bonds are sold, we already have the demo contractor already under contract. We already have the demo permit ready to go.
So let's say August 3rd, like August. The reason I'm asking you that,
by August 15th.
By August, because after tonight, tomorrow morning, I'm gonna get a call from 2 people on that street, and they're gonna ask me what you did last night, right? When will those buildings come down?
Sure.
And I'm gonna tell them, well, the developer told me August 15th.
So this is and I appreciate that, because it's been delayed, and we have not gotten any demolition done except for one building on Maple Court. I hear you, and I want to get those buildings down as soon as possible. The 4-story building is its own animal because of the current entitlement to rehab. All the rest of the buildings, all are part of the footprint for the 240 units, which this TEFRA hearing is about. That's all it's about, is these 240 units. And so as soon as the bond sale happens, the first thing that happens is the buildings come down. But we've been trying to do a bond sale for 2 years now almost. And this is the last opportunity that we have for a bond sale. If we don't extend the TEFRA though, there is no opportunity for a bond sale, so we just start at square one again.
Okay, so thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm gonna be, has a motion been? Yeah, the motion.
Well, actually, we haven't closed the public hearing, so, and I had one more question. We did close the public hearing? We brought the applicant up. Yeah, so.
We did close.
No, well, the applicant was the last speaker in the public hearing. That was my intent anyway, but I have a question of staff. Is there anything we can do in the motion this evening, to add to the motion this evening to make that a date certain that we will, the buildings must immediately come down within a certain 15 days of when the bond sale closes?
I think as long as you don't include it in if it's included in part of the resolution and the applicant, I see him nodding down there, is agreeable to it, but not included in the bond resolution, but just included as part of the motion, I think that's probably fine.
Oh, okay. It wouldn't be part of the bond resolution, but it would be in our motion.
It would just be an amendment to a motion that would say, and demo of the phase 1 buildings to occur by.
So I would like to offer that amendment to my own motion and ask if the seconder would agree. Okay. Now, yes, you're right. We must have closed the public hearing because I made a motion. You're right. But then we had more questions. Okay, sorry. I'm losing track. Now you wanted to, okay.
So I'm going to be supporting this for 2 reasons. Well, one, with great pause. For some of the concerns that have been expressed up here. But at the same time, we need those buildings down. We need the homes down. And it has, the neighbors over there have been on edge for all of the problems you cited, for all of that. And because their backyards are up against that fence. And so, this is a tough vote for me, but I'll be voting yes.
All right. I don't see any other requests to speak right now. So anyone else want to speak? No. I'll call for the motion. I'll call for the vote. And the motion passes with 4 aye votes and 3 no votes. So there you have it. And that is with the amendment in the motion to require that the buildings be brought down within 15 days of the bond sale. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to item number 7, introduction of an ordinance to establish a soft story seismic screening program for multifamily residential buildings and voluntary seismic retrofit standards for soft story buildings. We'll hear from Development Services Director Simpson.
Yes, thank you. And we were before council back on March 26th in a work session, and we incorporated your comments and worked with a technical consultant who's an expert in this field to help us draft the ordinance this evening, and Laurel James will present the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening, Mayor, Council. We've come back to you after March 26th work session to discuss seismic retrofits and screening for multifamily buildings. First, we're going to go over a brief review of, again, what the hazard and the risk are to Hayward of soft story buildings. And then we'll talk a little bit about the proposed ordinance we bring to you today based on your feedback on March 26th. So the hazard is that earthquake risk along the Hayward Fault and the performance of multifamily buildings could cause losses to Hayward tenants, property owners, and to the city. We know that we sit on the Hayward Fault, which has the highest risk of an earthquake in the next 30 years of all the faults in the Bay Area, and the Bay Area as a whole has a very high risk of an earthquake in the next 30 years. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Soft story buildings are typically defined as multifamily residential housing buildings that are built to older code standards that weren't as rigorous in terms of seismic performance. By definition, they have 2 or more stories. Oftentimes, they're defined as having multiple units, and they're characterized by a large space that is typically on the ground story, but can be on other stories known as the target story. In a major earthquake, the building shakes, and then the target story fails. Soft story retrofits have been a priority in several policy documents that the council in the past has adopted, including the 2040 General Plan, the 2016 Local Hazard Mitigation Plan, and the Complete Communities Strategic Initiative 2-year action plan. So the possible losses, projected risks, and impact of soft story buildings in a major earthquake on the city of Hayward include a potentially 300 based on staff's estimate with a sidewalk survey that used Alameda County assessor's data, volunteers from Cal State East Bay, and the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute to take a look at these buildings that met our criteria, which included buildings with 5 or more units, 2 or more stories, built before 1979, and those are buildings that could be at risk in an earthquake. So the consequences of this are to tenants loss of life, property, and housing, to owners loss of property and income, and to the city of Hayward an additional need for post-earthquake shelter and services for a displaced population, and a permanent loss of housing stock, and particularly often affordable housing. Finally, I want to highlight who lives in potential soft story buildings. We know from recent conversations that 48% of Hayward's housing units are rentals. 44% of Hayward's rental housing units are in potential soft story buildings based on the sidewalk survey, and we have a breakdown based on more recent Alameda County assessor's data coming up for you. 60% of Latinx Hayward residents live in rental housing, and 75% of Black and African American Hayward residents live in rental housing, so this has a disproportionate impact on people of color in our community. Finally, I want to share with you some highlights of the ordinance, again, based on your feedback in that March 26th work session. The goals of this ordinance, just to review as outlined in the staff report, are to improve current building data in support of future response, recovery, and mitigation planning, and to increase awareness of the existence and potential risk of soft story buildings among building owners and tenants. This ordinance includes a mandatory soft story screening program and adopts standards for voluntary soft story retrofit work, along with that screening program, to give guidance to building owners who would like to voluntarily retrofit their buildings. Some of the features on this ordinance based on the March 26th work session are, again, that it's a mandatory screening ordinance and a voluntary retrofit ordinance. Based on our work with our engineering consultant, who again is an expert in the soft story ordinance development field in the Bay Area, we've changed the screening program to not require an engineering evaluation. An engineering evaluation only really makes sense for a mandatory retrofit program and is not included in this ordinance. Mandatory engineering evaluations are very expensive. They require a lot of time, and they will sit on a shelf unless they're used, and they're only used when a retrofit is completed. To achieve the goals of this ordinance, we only need a screening program that doesn't require an engineering evaluation. Because of this, we've also adopted retrofit standards based on your guidance to reduce risk in a life safety standard, which allows folks to evacuate after an initial earthquake, or it's designed to allow folks to evacuate after an initial earthquake and prevent collapse. Because of the randomization inherent in earthquakes and earthquake shaking, this could mean that buildings that otherwise would not remain standing following an earthquake may potentially remain standing following a major earthquake. Additionally, because we've lowered the screening standard, we've increased the scope of the ordinance, again, based on your feedback, to include 3 or more unit multifamily residential buildings. The cost of this lowered screening standard is a factor of 10 less than an engineering evaluation, more or less, based on anecdotal evidence from our conversations with our engineering professional. And it also allows us to get better data on where we might see risk in our community. We've included a timeline of 12 to 18 months, depending on building size, in this ordinance, again, because we're suggesting a screening process that takes much less time. We've outlined exemption from future designations for retrofit work in this ordinance. While it is required by state law, we further clarified what that means for the city of Hayward based on your feedback. Parking requirements are not automatically waived for soft-story retrofits under this ordinance. They can be requested through the current process that exists in our planning and building division. So staff has the discretion to allow them where necessary to complete retrofits, but they're not automatically granted or waived. And finally, there is no noticing requirement included in this ordinance. And the reason for this is staff, after much deliberation, recommends that the city maintain the database of soft-story buildings and publicize it and ultimately integrate it into the rental housing database that's under development right now. Requiring landlords and property managers and owners to notice tenants would include this notification and a long list of other notifications that property owners and managers are required to provide to tenants at the time of lease. In addition, the enforcement of that requirement would be based on complaints. The city doesn't automatically review every lease in the city, and so it would require tenants who are sometimes in a more vulnerable position to tell us when there's been a violation of this rule, rather than use that enforcement mechanism. The city staff recommends that the city itself maintains and publicizes this data. Just to give you an idea of the changing scope of the ordinance based on including parcels with 3-unit or larger buildings in addition to parcels with 5-unit or larger buildings, we go from 230 parcels that would be included in the screening program to 417, but we also increase the data that we collect on the proportion of the housing stock. And finally, I wanted to illustrate the screening process as it has been illustrated in previous presentations to the City Council. This screening process that is included in the ordinance includes a broad estimate of potential soft-story buildings based on the assessor data using the criteria that staff has recommended: 3 or more units, pre-1979, 2 or more story buildings. The city will use this data to notify building owners. And again, these would be multifamily residential buildings specifically. Building owners would provide permit numbers, floor plans, or work with a design professional to exclude themselves from this list. If they were unable to, they would remain on the list and could potentially go through an engineering evaluation and retrofit to remove themselves from the list. And we would use this information to determine if the building doesn't or may have a possible vulnerability because of a soft story condition. So the next steps is if the ordinance is approved, it will come back to council for final adoption on July 2nd. The ordinance would then take effect on August 1st. The city would notice the affected building owners within 90 days per the ordinance, which is by October 30th. The deadline for 5-unit buildings to complete their screening forms would be October 31st, 2020, and the building for 3 or more unit buildings to complete their screening forms would be, 3 or 4 unit buildings to complete their screening forms would be April 30th, 2021. And with that, I'll open it to your questions and comments. Thank you.
I don't think we have any questions, so I'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone who would like to speak to it? Seeing no one, I will close public comment and entertain Councilmember Wahab.
Sorry, I guess this is a question. Yeah, it was a slip of the finger, if you will. I do want to ask, and I genuinely appreciate the report and how staff is understanding how tenants are at risk when reporting some of the concerns that they have against their landlords. I wanted to ask, what happens when the mandatory screening shows a need for soft story retrofit and the landlord prefers not to, or is trying to overshow that they're not?
So without getting too technical, which I'll leave to our engineer, the screening program wouldn't show a need for retrofit. It would only show a lack of need for retrofit. The level of screening and evaluation that's required to show a need for retrofit is much higher than this program that's included in the ordinance, is much more expensive and time consuming. And so this would be sort of the first pass of understanding Hayward's exposure and Hayward's residents, tenants' exposure to risk in soft story buildings. If an owner did not want to retrofit, currently this is a voluntary seismic retrofit ordinance, they would not be required to at this point in time.
And the reason why I ask is primarily because I'm more concerned if a disaster were to happen, and since these are very old buildings that we know are not necessarily up to par, will we be liable for the lack of checks we implement on something we know may be at fault, considering we live on a fault?
I would defer to the city attorney for that question.
I can restate the question. I just wanted to know if a disaster happens and this soft story is, let's say, destroyed or something happens like that, will we be liable for the lack of checks we implement on something we know may be at fault at that point, since we live on a fault?
Generally speaking, no.
Do you care to elaborate a little bit more than that? Because I'm just concerned with, like, let's say a ghost ship happens, but more in the fault type of situation, and, you know, you saw that come back to the city in the fact that, you know, there's not enough checks and balances on those types of, a little bit different, but you get my point.
Well, Mayor and Council, let's not make this a ghost ship discussion, which is unique, and I have been following that story, so I'm not trying to characterize a response as a ghost ship response. But generally speaking, California law has many governmental immunities under state law, including that issuing permits doesn't necessarily mean that the failure to comply results in liability if the person who received the permit doesn't adhere to it. Where it becomes concerning is if there is a mandatory requirement for compliance or a building code compliance, and if there is a failure to inspect, that may create liability. But it's situational. So this is more of a general response. As I currently understand it, the retrofit proposal is for voluntary compliance. If there were a mandatory inspection and a mandatory compliance policy, then I think the discussion changes significantly. There would likely be fees, there would have to be inspections, there would have to be follow-up, probably regular inspections after the work is done. So that's a separate discussion from the discussion that we're currently having. But as currently contemplated, there is not liability if an owner does not retrofit, as between the city and the building owner. As between the building owner and residents, that might be a different kind of a liability question.
And the fact that we're asking for a mandatory screening, what you stated, will absolve us from any potential liability, even with the mandatory screening, or how does that work? Because that's what we're asking for.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Mendel.
So I'll move the staff recommendation. If there's a second, I'll speak on it briefly. So I think it's good that we're basically trying to scope the problem here. We have some guesstimates about the number of units that this affects, and this mandatory screening will allow us to hone that down. What we'll end up with is rather than being 200 to 400 units, it's going to be something less than that, and maybe it's a couple dozen, maybe it's a couple hundred, or whatever. But we'll have a good sense of what the actual problem is, and at that point, a couple years from now, we can have a conversation about what, if anything, we feel we need to do to start whittling those numbers down. But let's just scope the problem first. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Lamnon.
Thank you, Mayor. I am supportive of the motion because I think it's a good first step. I mean, I have nervousness about our current residents and the safety and so on, but I think this is a really balanced first step, and I appreciate that. I've also we've talked some in the past about looking at, can we decrease fees? Can we work with property owners? Because not only is there this capital improvement that we want them to make, but are there, is there financing opportunities that we can help them with? We did that with the green program to some, it worked somewhat, but that same kind of concept of whether or not it's reducing our fees and spreading them out, or working with equity partners to try and get low-cost loans and so on, both for the retrofits around this particular issue. And just because I have the microphone, I'm also going to throw in the water meter issue. It's one of the things that we want in our complexes, and I know it's slightly off topic, so I'll be brief, which is just that same mindset of being able to work with our property owners to get them to be the residences we want. And also, we know that submetering would help with our environmental impact and our water conservation. And so if we can figure out the financing for the soft story, maybe we can apply it to that as well. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further speakers, I'll be supporting the motion as well, and I'll call for the vote. Okay, and the motion passes with 6 aye votes and 1 no vote. Okay. Moving on to item number 8, approval of a resolution updating the fiscal year 2020 master fee schedule with new fees and charges in the maintenance services section related to facility rentals in City Hall and the 21st Century Library and Learning Center, and accepting the proposed changes to the maintenance services section of the 2020 master fee schedule. And we will hear from library services. No, we will hear from Mr. Rollman, the maintenance services director.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. We're here tonight to provide a brief update to the FY20 master fee schedule in maintenance services. For a little bit of background and context, maintenance services currently manages 4 City Hall event locations, which include the Rotunda, the council chambers, the pre-function, and the plaza out front. The approved FY20 master fee schedule has pricings for these 4 locations and has 5 meeting room locations in the new library. After some analysis, as the building's gotten closer to open, only 4 of the 5 library meeting rooms will be actually available for public rental when the library does open. So we've done an update to the fee schedule that was needed to just better represent what we actually have available to the public and to really harmonize the pricing between the City Hall locations and the new library spaces. So with that, our summary and recommendations for this evening will be that staff is going to present council with the necessary updates and changes to the maintenance services master fee schedule. Will be effective September 1 of 2019. Staff recommends that council approve the resolution and accept the updated maintenance services master fee schedule. It's a mouthful. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the library's management analyst, Brad Olson, to give through the presentation and methodology of how we got here.
Thank you, Todd, and good evening, Mayor and members of the council. As Todd mentioned, an update to the fee schedule was needed to accurately represent the facilities we have available and to the public and to harmonize the systems that we use and the pricing structures. For the purposes of this presentation, I will be giving an overview of the project and presenting our key findings. There is a more detailed breakdown of the project beginning on the bottom of page 1 of your staff report. As is the case with many projects, this one began with market research. We, as a group, our staff spoke to representatives from 13 local jurisdictions. We gathered details on the facilities that they had, the pricing structures they used, the user types, and the systems that they used to manage their facility bookings. Of those 13, there were about 6 that had facilities that were very similar to the city of Hayward. So we started tabulating those prices and beginning our analysis. The next phase was really the cost comparison, and the 6 jurisdictions that had comparable spaces to the city of Hayward included the city of Dublin, city of Lafayette, city of Newark, city of San Leandro, city of San Mateo, and the city of Walnut Creek. To correct for small variations in room size, some had 300, some had 250, we have something similar to that. What we did was we divided the price by the number that fit in that room. So we had it at a per person level in order to tabulate those prices. And then our team went a little step further, correcting those per person prices to account for income differences between these jurisdictions before we use those as an example for what we thought we'd do for the city of Hayward. So to go into that part a little bit more, we realized in our comparison that the comparison cities we selected were just selected for the purposes of having facilities that were like ours. We were not accounting in that comparison for the average income of the people of those jurisdictions. And so we wanted to correct those prices to eliminate anything that was just related to any variation pricing that was just because of the average income. So in this table here, we have the median house income by household from the US Census data, American Fact Finder data from 2017. And that, starting with Hayward and then alphabetized at the jurisdictions we looked at, those are those median incomes per household. So you can see there's a lot of variation, and that right column is an income factor that we calculated by dividing the median income of that location by that of Hayward. Sorry. So those income factors were then used to adjust the prices accordingly. So using our corrected per person pricing as a guide, the staff proposed a new fee schedule for maintenance services. In the proposed schedule, all City of Hayward event spaces and meeting rooms in the new library are in one table rather than split into a couple sections. This simplifies you can see it all in one place, and then it simplifies the pricing structure because the existing structure had 7 user categories, and we brought that down to the 4 that are pictured here. We have We have two personal use categories for individuals who live in Hayward and individuals who live outside of Hayward. And then we have two organization categories, one for nonprofits or community organizations, and the other for commercial businesses. So this, a very detailed version, or more detailed with all the prices and fees, is included as attachment 3 in your documents. What I wanted to call in, this only captures some of the information, but what I wanted to show here is this is just the rates for personal use, and what we strive to do is for the residents of Hayward, we kept those prices at the lowest, so that is the lowest price category, is individuals who are using this for their personal use and who live in the city. And these are, so those are highlighted here. This next table is for the organizations, nonprofit and commercial. And what, like comparable jurisdictions that we looked at, they wanted to provide favorable pricing for the nonprofits. So we have those also as a favorable price compared to their commercial alternatives. I also wanted to note on this slide that the Weeks Library we retained as a free hourly rate. That is how it is currently handled right now. It's no cost to the public to use the space. There are some assumptions related to that. It comes with the expectation that meetings held in the Legacy Room are open to the public. They can't be used for fundraising. We do have spaces in the city of Hayward if that's your motive. But we want to encourage, at least have a place where events that meet those requirements can be held at a low cost. So I'll basically repeating what Todd said, we are presenting the council with these updates to the fee schedule, and we recommend approval of the resolution, which you have as attachment 2, and the acceptance of the updated master fee schedule, which is attachment 3. This concludes my presentation. Todd and I are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. My question isn't regarding the fees, but once the library is open to the public, there's going to be high demand to use this space. There's already high demand in renting the rotunda for quinceañeras, weddings, different nonprofit events. So can staff speak to, are we going to be using technology, kind of a calendar, so the public can see what days are available? Can you kind of just speak to that? Because it's already becoming a little bit challenging to manage and the library is not even open yet. So can you just speak to the plan in terms of booking these rooms?
Definitely. The group that worked on this project, this fee schedule was a portion of that, but the other large portion was how we're going to coordinate all those reservations. We are working with, part of that research was to figure out what systems other jurisdictions used. And in our research, we looked at a lot of different ones and decided to go with LibCal, which Alameda County uses. It has all the rooms in one place. We're currently building out that portal and hope that it would be ready by the September 1st timeline when these new fees would take effect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lamnon.
Thank you for asking that question. And thank you for the work on this item to come up with a balanced system, so appreciate that. A couple questions. So for the council chambers, was there consideration of a fee for a technician if they, if there's an ask to have the place recorded, or there's typically, unlike some of our other places, this room tends to have a little bit of need for staff supervision beyond sort of the security guard downstairs. So
We're currently working on a shared use agreement with HUSD, which is the main driver for the technicians and stuff. So that's something that's going on separate of this event we're doing here.
Fair enough, but sometimes there are screenings, like public interest viewing videos that are shown here and so on. So it sounds like that wasn't talked about. Hi, Liz.
Good evening, all. I believe there's already a fee, and I'm not sure what section it is, but it does allow us to charge for an AV tech.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you, I apologize.
We do use that.
Sorry, I missed that. Thank you very much. And then, was there also consideration of, so for the library, there's the adjunct room. If you rent the main room, then it's $10, I think, to do the prep area room, and that makes sense. Was there consideration of a fee structure that, for instance, if you rented this room, or, well, you're not supposed to rent 2A, but if you're renting this room, that the pre-function area is a little bit lower? Because right now it's just separate fees.
I don't think we discussed that. It could be something we look at in the future, but not this round. We did not discuss it.
Yeah.
But Liz,
Actually, when they rent the council chamber currently, the pre-function is part of that because it is a fire, people to go out, so I don't have two events happening at the same time. So that's why there's no separate fee. The pre-function comes into play when they're renting the rotunda and they want the second floor.
Gotcha. Yes. Okay, thank you. So glad you're here. And the last question is political events. Do we have a policy about whether or not political events are allowed to be held on city property?
Can I repeat that, please? I'm sorry.
Sure, no problem. The question was, do we have a policy about whether or not political events can be held on city property?
I would probably prefer to defer to the city attorney on that. I don't think that we necessarily have a policy at the department level.
I think we've, as a general rule, allowed nonpartisan events to occur here, sort of League of Women Voter, candidate forums, things like that. But we typically have not allowed partisan events to occur. It's kind of been our standard policy.
Yeah.
But we do also have to pay attention to First Amendment, so we can allow events on the plaza because it is a First Amendment gathering space, but these events require rental, and so each one of those gets reviewed and comes in, and we review those individually.
So I would suggest that maybe look at, given that it's going to be a busy political season, and that if we don't have it in writing somewhere, that our policy is to not have, to just have nonpartisan events. It's probably not a bad idea to put that in writing somewhere. It's not tonight's item, but since we were talking about our spaces. Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, I think that in our side chat, it was about fundraisers, and I don't believe that that's allowed on city property just because of an ethics issue. So if that can just be clearly stated, so when people do request it, they're informed.
Yeah, political fundraisers, but also anything that's, somebody can hold an information event or a fundraiser. Those are all, so.
And just to be clear, we have allowed nonprofits to hold fundraisers, if they're raising, but not political fundraisers, correct?
Good policy.
Although I would note that we have had them in the past, but I agree with, I think maybe we do need some of this written down to have a policy, and I agree that would be a good one.
Long time ago.
Well, it was quite a while ago, prior to the current city manager's tenure, and I think, well, maybe not everybody else up here, but most of you. Okay, so with that, I'm going to open public comment on this item. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this item? Seeing no one, I'm going to close public hearing and entertain a motion. Or
Second.
okay, the staff recommendation is moved by Councilmember Marquez. Do you have a microphone tonight, or okay?
We still have several items.
Moved by Councilmember Marquez, seconded by Councilmember Mendel. On the motion. And the motion passes with 7 aye votes. Now we are moving on to item number 9. adoption of an emergency ordinance establishing a temporary moratorium on rent increases exceeding 5% of current rent on all pre-1979 units except single-family homes and condominiums. And we'll hear from City Manager McAdoo.
I think we'll just, I don't, and Christina is going to jump in, but this is a follow-up action item from last week's council meeting to help protect tenants in the period between which the council adopted the ordinance, which happened a little while ago this evening, and when the ordinance actually goes into effect July 25th. So we'll do a very brief staff presentation, I believe.
Great, thank you, City Manager. You just gave half of my report right there. So to prevent unreasonable and excessive rent increases prior to the adoption of the new ordinance, Council directed us last week to return with this item. It would prohibit rent increases above 5%, and that would be an annual rent increase, so it would include any rent increase that they've taken within the last 12 months. This will only be in place from the time that the ordinance is adopted until the time it takes effect on July 25th, and the provisions would be applicable to all pre-1979 units except for single-family homes and condominiums. To pass this emergency ordinance, it would require 5 affirmative votes. And it would become effective immediately. If there are only 4 affirmative votes, then it would take effect 30 days after the second reading, which would be past the date of the adoption of the effective date of the residential rent stabilization ordinance. That concludes my report.
Thank you for being succinct. So are there any council questions about this item? Seeing no one? Councilmember Lambden, yes.
Thank you. So just wanted to verify the timeline. So if somebody issued a rent increase today, it can't go into effect for 30 days. Is that correct?
That's correct, or 60 days if it's over 10%.
Right. So 25th is exactly a month from today. So help me understand the need for this. I understand the intent. I'm struggling a little with the need.
Correct. So they could issue a rent increase with it if they issued it today. It could. They've already taken the action to issue it, and the ordinance takes effect 30 days from there. This ordinance, actually, the new one specifies that they would not be able to have a rent increase take effect during this 30-day time period. So it actually looks like it covers anything that may have been noticed 30 days prior.
30 days prior of the ordinance taking effect.
So yes, so the ordinance that will take effect on the 25th, it would only apply to rent increase notices that were issued after that effective date. But the emergency ordinance clarifies that anything that was noticed that would take effect, if the rent increase would take effect during this time period, it would be limited to 5% versus being noticed.
So it essentially, so just to be clear, when the ordinance takes effect in July, if somebody puts out a rent increase today, that would still go through. If it was above 5%, that would still go through without this ordinance.
Correct. So if somebody even issued, the way it's written in the ordinance, if they issued the rent increase notice days before the ordinance takes effect, then they could still apply that rent increase. But I'd like to request that the city attorney clarify.
So
if I'm not
and maybe just to clarify is, I think any rent increase that may be effective during this next 30-day period. So it would apply, it would basically cap. So even if they went even if they sent a notice out 20 days ago, if it goes into effect, in 10 days, it would be capped at 5%. That's how the emergency moratorium is written. So it basically covers any rent increase that goes into effect regardless of when the notice happened in the next 30-day period. So for example, the gentleman who was here last week, for example, his rent increase would be capped at 5%. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it also gives the owner the ability to petition for more, even during this period, if there's an issue with that. So there's still recourse for them to be able to petition for more if they have to do more than 5%.
So for instance, if they had planned for a 10% rent increase, they had done their 60-day notice, not justifying a 10%, but you know, if they had done what is currently law and done their 60-day notice and they intended to do a 10% increase, the emergency ordinance would say no, but they could petition to say, here's the reason that I felt justified in doing that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other council questions? Seeing none, I'm going to open public comment on this item. We have a card. Alicia Lawrence.
Alicia Lawrence, the Hayward Collective. Please vote yes. That's all. Thank you.
And thank you for being succinct as well. All right. And is there anyone else who would like to comment on this item? Seeing no one? Right. We will, I would entertain council motion or close public comment and entertain a council motion.
I'd like to make a motion to pass this.
Yes, okay. Okay, moved by Councilmember Wahab, seconded by Councilmember Marquez, and I do believe it was you, Councilmember Wahab, that brought this up when we were working on this last week, so thank you for that. It was good foresight there, and with that, seeing no one else wishing to speak on the item, I'll call for the vote. And the motion passes with 7 aye votes. Councilmember Wahab?
Yes. I just wanted to thank the staff before you guys leave, Director Ott and Ms. Morales. You guys have been tremendous in the amount of work that you guys have done in a very short period of time. I know that you guys, I personally feel like this ordinance is, the rent stabilization and tenant protection ordinance, as well as this emergency ordinance, is very fair to all parties involved. So I really just want to commend you guys and inform everybody that you guys have literally helped thousands of families. And I know we talk about units all the time, but these are families. So thank you.
I can echo that. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to thank Lacey before she left, so hopefully she'll watch us later. But thank you, Alicia, the collective, Sarah with Centro Legal de la Raza, and all the other tenants and everyone that's come out and spoken about this. And thank you to Councilmember Wahab for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, and our city attorney's office as well, yes. All right, so now moving on to item number 10, we're making great progress this evening. Adoption of a resolution approving an amendment to the City of Hayward salary plan for fiscal year 2020. No. Second. All right, but first, before we go to the vote, we're going to hear from briefly, I think, from Human Services Director Collins.
Absolutely briefly, Mayor and Council, thank you. So SB 1436 requires that whenever the council is taking action that impacts executives' compensation, it's done so in a public forum. That being the case, the report has a change to the salary for the Director of Information Technology Services. So we are increasing that salary by 6%. This increase is part of what we have to do in order for our recruitment and retention strategies to try to keep some pace with the external market, especially as it relates to information technology. So that's the only change in the report, although there are many changes in the report that has to do with executives and that we're required by law to summarize in this meeting. So with that, if you have any questions about that particular one or anything in the report, I'm happy to answer them now.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
All right, okay, that's great. Are there any questions from council? No, seeing none. I'm going to open the public comment on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I'm going to close public comment. Councilmember Salinas, I believe you earlier, would you like to repeat your earlier?
Yeah, I have 45 minutes of questions.
Yeah. No. Question period's over. You want to move the item? Okay. Second. Moved by Councilmember Salinas, seconded by Councilmember Marquez. On the motion. Does she?
How about Councilmember Cermeño?
Ask her if she's there, if she wants to vote on this.
Just call an abstention. She can. We can correct it in minutes later if she needs to.
All right, go ahead and count this. Oh, she's coming back. Okay. This is item number 10, motion to approve staff recommendation. And the motion passes with 7 aye votes. Now we have done a lot tonight, and we have one item on the agenda, and that is item number 11, adoption of resolutions approving extensions of the employment agreements between the City of Hayward and the City Attorney and City Clerk, and authorizing the mayor, that would be me, to execute those agreements on behalf of the council. And again, we will hear very briefly from Human Resources Director Collins.
Super briefly, so SB 1436 requires that you talk about changes to compensation for executives in a public forum. This one's probably borderline. We're erring on the side of caution since you were here in a captive audience anyway, because there are no specific changes to the compensation package. However, you are extending the duration of the contract for 1 year for the city clerk and the city attorney. I can answer any questions that you have.
We have none.
I haven't even gotten on that item yet. Yeah, we have none. I will open public comment on this item. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I'll close public comment and entertain.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Salinas, I believe, right?
Mayor Holliday,
Councilmember Mendel?
Can HR Director Collins make one further comment before you?
No. Yes, she can. She go ahead, make a comment, yes.
I would like to point out that my boss has a 5-year contract with no changes, and so that is why there was no need to do anything with her contract.
Okay, yes. And I will make
We've retained her.
First of all, I will make the comment that our city attorney and our city clerk have left the room at the moment because this does impact them in terms of we're extending their contracts 1 year. And I would also like to thank council members Salinas and Marquez and myself, who serve on the Council Appointed Officers Committee, who sort of oversaw the review process, and thank the entire council for their participation in that process and our appointed officers. I think it's something that we do every year, and it's a good process for all of us. So with that, Councilmember Cermeño, you had, okay. And so if there are no further comments, I'll call for the vote. And the motion passes with 7 aye votes. You can call the city attorney and the city clerk back in and let them know that they're still on the job here, that their contracts have been extended for 1 year. And yes, we do thank you very much, all 3 of you, for your service during the past year. And we look forward to continuing to work with all of you in the coming year. And with that, we come to our city manager comments.
I have no comments.
Oh, wow, okay. I'm going to move up to the, we're going to move on to council reports and announcements. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to invite everyone. This Saturday is going to be our 6th annual Tennyson All-America Festival at Mount Eden Mansion Park at 2451 West Tennyson Road from 11 to 3. There's going to be free entertainment, lots of vendors, and a backpack and helmet giveaway to the first 100 attendees. So please join us in this pre-4th of July celebration. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other council comments tonight? Councilmember Salinas?
Yes, I just wanted to make a general announcement to participating families and kids. This week, Words for Lunch opened at Weeks Park, right next door to the Junior Giants. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11:30 to 1:30, there'll be lunch, free lunch, and reading activities at Weeks Park. And at the end of each day, kids go home with a free book. And so that will be started this week, and it will end August 1st. And I just wanted to thank all of the partners, the Hayward Public Library, Hayward Promise Neighborhood, HARD, the Kids Breakfast Club. I think that's all. And of course, the Junior Giants for partnering with us. So today was the first day. We had a little over 200 kids. So a lot of apples.
Did the Junior Giants start already?
Yeah. The opening
day is
Monday.
Monday. That's what I thought. So, but they're
At 9
already
a.m.
on. Okay. All right. Thank you for that announcement. Anyone else? No. Seeing no one. That does bring us to adjournment this evening, and this is a sad one. We are adjourning in memory of two people tonight. Actually, I'll start with Des Patton, who is someone who lived in the city for quite a long time. He was a founding member of the Spring Grove Neighborhood Association, worked very hard to save Spring Grove Park in that neighborhood. He also served on an Metropolitan Transportation Commission advisory board, and he actually was very active in a number of aspects in this community for a long time. And he worked for BART and was part of the of his union there, and did a lot of volunteer activities. And we offer our sympathy to his wife, his widow, Linda Bennett, who was a longtime commissioner on both the library and planning commissions in this city. And then I'm very sad to announce that a week ago yesterday, our former mayor, Roberta Cooper, passed away. Bertie, as many of us called her, I was pleased to serve with her for the first 2 years that I served on city council, and she was the mayor. She was a member of the city council from 1988 through 1994, and then was elected to the first of 3 terms as mayor in 1994, serving as mayor until 2006. Prior to that career as city council member and mayor, she was a longtime teacher in our community. And following her service as mayor, I know that she devoted a lot of her spare time to volunteering for the Meals on Wheels organization. She was the first mayor to sit in this chair and serve in this building, and she gets a lot of the credit for this building and all of the redevelopment that we did in the downtown during those redevelopment years. Much of that was done under her watch. And so the city manager informs me that the our city flags will be lowered for 1 week, I believe, starting tomorrow, in her memory. And I would ask our city staff to work with Des Patton's family and also with Mayor Cooper's family to plant trees somewhere in the city in their memory. And so with that yes, Councilmember Salinas, sure.
Yeah, I wanted to also, Mayor Cooper was a longtime board member of the Kids Breakfast Club. She was on the board when I started 26, almost 27 years ago. She was, her background was education. She and I worked a lot together on issues around literacy, issues around procuring books and distributing books. And of course, she also worked, I worked with her to really enhance the nutrition component of the Kids Breakfast Club. And the board at the Kids Breakfast Club and the founder, of course, Dr. Marlena Urick, a big loss. She was a fierce voice for kids in the city. And so, God bless her.
Yeah, she was that, and I didn't know that. I'm not surprised to hear that she was involved. And I would also add that she stood up for LGBT rights, and also for our environment, especially in the LGBT rights area. She stood up for that at a time when it was not as well supported as I believe our city does support it now, and got a lot of nasty comments directed at her for standing up on that issue. And she was through her membership in the United States Mayor's Conference, pushed for and made us one of the first cities in the area to adopt a climate action plan. So very much a steward of the environment. There are many other things that we could say about Roberta Cooper too, but I think all of those things, she definitely was. She loved Hayward. She worked hard for the betterment of our city, and she accomplished a lot. And so, in honor and memory of Des Patton and former Hayward Mayor Roberta Cooper, this meeting is adjourned.